this week. First up, it's the security news. Microsoft lost its keys, lol drivers. If you were the CISO, try to keep employees happy, but if you can't, make sure you remove their accounts when they leave. Gaming device finds a missing child. $3 brute forcing. Undocumented instructions are sometimes the best instructions. Remote code on your oscilloscope. Fuzzing satellites. Routers are great places to hide. Typos lead to information leaks of U.S. military emails. Pwning yourself. Pwning security researchers. Getting pwned by a movie. And Worm GPT. Our interview this week is with Sumit and Rohit from the SecOps Group. We discuss security certifications, a new certification backed by the Black Hat Conference, and technical details behind PHP type juggling attacks. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. SOC analysts are often overworked and underappreciated. In fact, many consider leaving their jobs or changing careers altogether. Devo is hosting the third annual SOC Analyst Appreciation Day to pay some long overdue kudos to analysts and encourage organizations to improve their job satisfaction and mental well-being. Join Devo and other cybersecurity industry professionals on October 18th for sessions and panels focused on de-stressing, SOC career development, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/Devo to register.
Well, I like the experience of following the roadkill truck on a hot summer day in an MG convertible. It's just something you'll never forget. And with that, here's Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly, coming to you in super low definition compliments of Darth Vader himself. It's episode number 791, being recorded on July 19th, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, the doctor is in the house, Dr. Doug White.
Hello. I'm here. I made it.
You did?
I know.
It's good.
I thought I wasn't going to, but I did.
Oh, there was a lot of, well, we're
back
all
and
here.
forth, traffic, important. Crazy stuff. But I made it, so
crazy.
Once
alien
again,
abductions, it's crazy.
Well, probes, the whole.
Yeah, there's always the probes. Speaking of probes, yeah. Mr. Josh Marbett is here with us. Josh, welcome.
Speaking of probes?
Yeah, you're a man who likes your probes. Your RF wireless probes.
Sure, whatever.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Right.
That's what I meant.
Of course.
Mr. Jeff Mann is with us as well. Jeff, welcome from the cabin.
Yes, I am out at the cabin enjoying a lovely hot and humid day, but it's not as bad when you're in the cabin. Hey, quick update for everyone. Hannah, many of you know, my granddaughter, she had her 6-month blood work today and all clear.
Yay. Happy for everyone in Hannah.
Go Hannah.
It's awesome news. Mr. Aaron is here with us. Aaron, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Good evening. Thank you for having me on. I noticed this evening that you're wearing a purple shirt, and I'm glad it's not turned upside down, as I learned recently what an upside down pineapple means.
That means something. It definitely means something.
And yep. Those of us that know will be keeping quiet, I guess.
Yes. Okay. We'll let you Google search for that one.
Oh my God. Not on your work computer.
Yeah, not on your work, and not an image search.
And that's
go to the your public library.
Public library on someone else's computer.
Exactly.
Google for that. Oh, we've got announcements. If you want links to all of my social media, podcast gear recommendations, links to podcasts I listen to, technical how-to blog posts, and links to my upcoming and previous presentations, you can visit my website at securitypodcaster.com. I'm making progress on some Flipper Zero content. I've got some Flipper Zeros that I was actually making good progress on it today on the first in the blog post series and hopefully some other content as well. So make sure you stay tuned. I know everyone's been asking for it. It's coming, I promise. Attend InfoSec World 2023 at Disney's Colorado Springs Resort September 23rd through the 28th. Listeners receive a 20% discount when registering using the code ISW23-SecWeek20 at securityweekly.com/InfoSec World 2023. On to the news. Are we talking about emails and typos and U.S. military secrets? Was it secrets or just sensitive information?
No, it wasn't even sensitive. It's not even on the classified
The headline
server.
said sensitive.
Well, I mean, anything you can presume is sensitive, but it was mostly coming from, they said the majority were from travel agents who were arranging travel for U.S. service people.
Well, let me set the stage. This is from the article. For over 10 years, millions of emails associated with the U.S. military have been getting sent to Mali. As everyone knows, that's a West African country who's allied with Russia.
It's actually sort of East African.
Well, the article said West Africa.
Oh, did it say West?
It did.
Okay.
It said West. I'm just, I'm reading what's in front of me.
It's just north of Burkina Faso.
It's on the internet. So, due to a typo, according to the Financial Times, instead of appending the military's .mil, M-I-L domain, to the recipient's email address, people frequently type .ml, the country identifier for Mali, by mistake. Yes.
Yeah, because everybody does that.
Everyone does that. And apparently there's a guy.
Okay, it is West. Yeah.
He intercepted 117,000 misdirected emails, several of which contain sensitive information relating to the U.S. military.
Yeah.
That's what the article says.
They said they had maps, all kinds of stuff.
I don't know how sensitive that information is. It included medical records, identity document information, lists of staff military bases, photos of military bases, naval inspection reports, ship crew lists, tax records, and more. Ship crew lists. Say that 10 times fast. Ship crew lists.
Ship crew lists.
I think, Paul, that's what the military calls OPSEC, operational security, which is you're trying to control ancillary information so that people can't put two and two together. The classic example back in the early 90s when the U.S. was engaged in this little thing called Desert Shield, everybody was trying to figure out when the war was going to start. And some smart, observant news reporter in the D.C. area one evening noticed that a whole bunch of pizza delivery trucks were showing up at the Pentagon. And so they're like, what's happening in the world? Why would they stay late at the Pentagon? The war is getting ready to start.
We must be invading somewhere.
Upset.
Well, the guy that found all this
worse.
was the top-level domain manager. He's based in Amsterdam.
Is that? Oh, okay. So you know more about this than I do.
Yeah, I did this story the other day, but it was, or yesterday. But it was basically this guy in Amsterdam, who's the top-level domain administrator for Mali, said that he, back in 2014, set up a capture server to catch this because the traffic was so extreme. And then he reported it to the Department of Defense, who said nothing.
I'm curious on the technology to do that, because I remember there being a setting somewhere in your mail server or mail cloud hosting provider. They're like, if you receive an email to a domain that you own that has a catch-all, like an email address that doesn't exist, you can funnel that to an inbox. Like, I don't remember. I did it years ago, but you can catch
you can funnel it to an inbox or to dev file.
Right.
Right, or you can just make a folder even and just funnel. I mean, which is the same thing as an inbox on a lot of email servers, but you just funnel it into some folder that you put everything that's got certain addresses on it or certain, and he was doing army.ml and navy.ml, and he got like hundreds of thousands, and then they didn't do anything, and then he said he quit catching them because it was so much.
Right.
And then he started again in January, and he said he had like 170,000.
But now he's leaving. It says his 10-year contract ends on Monday.
So Mali's on their own.
Mali's on their own.
But he was receiving it.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do to prevent that kind of stuff from being sent in the first place?
There's literally nothing anybody can. I mean, because the Department of Defense said we have this under control internally, but there's nothing they can do. If I sit down right now and I send an email to a bad address, there's nothing the Department of Defense can do to keep me.
There's not nothing. I mean, they could go to the folks that run the internet and say any email, or actually they'd have to go to everyone who routes email. Or could they go to the top level domain? They could
go to the
the
top level domain because
the top level subdomain being ML for Mali,
Right.
is there a Navy and an Army and an Air Force .ml that are registered
Yeah,
subdomains?
it's MIL though, isn't it? It's MIL.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
You've
there's.
never been. They haven't got squat.
I guess it's really hard to prevent people from sending email to the wrong
But
address.
they do need to work with their travel
They could
agencies.
basically black hole the whole country of Mali from the internet, but that would mean no one could send email
Right, but
to that country.
But I mean,
that's where I was going.
I'm
with
not
this,
as worried about like I send an email to some random person in the military as actual contractors to the Department of Defense. These travel agencies are sending stuff to the wrong addresses.
Yeah, so it's like it's outside of any
and that can
one
actually
person.
be very
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
That somebody's travel arrangement. So I'm supposed to be flying into Baghdad as a part of some mission, and that gets sent to the wrong address, and now somebody knows who's coming and when they're coming. And
I don't know if I added the story. I don't think I added the story, but it's very similar. Speaking of OPSEC, and Jeff, going back to your story, there was a Russian military leader. I'll phrase it as, because I don't have the story handy. I read it, forgot to add it. That was on an app that tracked where he ran.
That's an old story. That's Strava.
Strava, yes. But
And
recently,
Strava was the one that released all of the hidden American military bases across the world.
right? But
Yeah,
recently,
yeah.
but this person, the military leader from Russia, was posting his map from Strava on social media. And apparently someone picked up on that, and he was assassinated. He was shot and killed
Really?
on his morning
they
run
usually fall out of a window.
on a morning that it was like rainy and foggy and hard to see people. And they believe, and then there's no evidence, and Ukraine has not admitted to it, but there's obviously speculation that Ukraine has observed this behavior and had the person assassinated.
The U.S. had that a few years ago.
There was also lots of stories at the start of the Ukraine-Russian war where the Russian soldiers who were moving towards Ukraine were using the Russian-Ukrainian version of Grindr, and the Ukrainian intelligence was doing things like arranging to meet them or finding out where they were and then dropping bombs on them.
It's all OPSEC, right?
Very important.
As
It's all
Jeff
us.
says.
It always has been.
But, so there's no immediate automated solution.
No.
What about doing, a little bit of analysis on who's sending these emails? Because I'm sure there's some, frequent abusers, especially if it's already set in your cache of your, your address book. If it's a travel agency, go to the travel agency and tell them, hey, you need to clean up your address book. It's a manual process, but it would get the job done eventually.
Yeah,
for
Surely
some percentage.
Surely you can DLP it, right?
No, you can't. You can do that on the .mil side, and that's
Right.
where the information, presumably the secret or classified information, would be coming out of. So that should absolutely be DLP. Anything going to .ml should be cut, except you need an exception or something like that to do that.
Yep.
From the other side, from the travel agency, if it's a commercial travel agency, let's say, that's a problem.
Yeah, and they just need to.
Yeah, because you don't know what email server the travel agency is going to be using, because that's the point where you would want to go.
It could be anything.
Yeah,
anywhere.
Could be Google.
It could be.
It's tough doing security where there is no immediate automated technical solution.
Correct.
Oh, they just have to put controls around that stuff and apply the same rules that they would to their internal stuff, to their contracting people, and tell them, hey, you're a travel agent, you want to work for DoD, you're going to have to comply with these controls.
Jesus, that's like some kind of cybersecurity maturity model certification or something.
It's hard to imagine.
It's a great idea.
only
How did we build that?
They could do that.
Now, there is a Russian presence in Mali, as stated in the article as well. They also say the DoD is aware of the issue. But again, it kind of comes back to what do you do
about it? Right. And I don't think Mali actually has much to do with it unless somebody sets up a server on that domain and starts trying to receive those emails, which probably somebody will now that the article's out.
Right.
Or maybe Larry and I already own those domains. I'm not sure.
You guys own a lot of domains.
We own a lot of domains.
I'm trying to shed some of my domains.
Not to belabor it, but refresh my memory sometime a little bit on how this works. If the master domain .ml, any subdomain is headed in their direction, it's getting some level into that country, and I guess that's where this guy was at a.
Well, in theory, it would go
ISP or
through
something like that.
It would go through whatever their MX record is on DNS.
Yeah, so you would have to do a MX record DNS lookup for Navy.ml.
Yeah.
And so someone just needs to register that domain, and then any email coming in would go to whatever MX server you set in the DNS record, which could be
and
your
likely
email.
somebody or some organization or entity within Mali has probably done that.
Yes, the
Shouldn't
person
surprise me.
who ran it had done that.
Or
yes.
somebody in St. Petersburg.
Or someone.
Otherwise, the emails would just kind of not go anywhere or bounce back, right?
Yeah, they just go into the undeliverable folder on like whatever server they get delivered to. So probably the top level domain server at that point.
Yep.
Well, I guess that's my question. What would be the top level server that they'd be going to that doesn't do anything with
star.ml? Well, whatever, it would depend on what the MX record says, but it probably like star.ml, which is what this guy in Amsterdam was controlling. So that's where he's sort of the gateway for all the mail going into Mali at that level, I guess. Yep. It doesn't have to be like that because you can actually redirect that stuff anywhere. But if there's just like a star, then it would go to probably the DNS email server for the top level domain, which apparently was what he was controlling.
So what's the country that's the two-letter CM? So all the .com email that gets misdirected, what country is that going to?
CM.
I don't know. Somebody look it up.
We're looking.
It's
I don't know what that is.
Sorry, what are we looking at? There's 5-year-old wanted to hug.
What is CM? CM is what
Cameroon.
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 Yeah.
Another African country.
Cameroon. There you go.
Make great rap relief
They probably
for
have the
cigars.
same problem.
Yeah.
Can I just say, for anybody that's tuning in from the UK sort of late in this show, the hosts aren't saying Molly, they're saying Mali. As Molly means something completely different in the UK.
Molly's a drug.
Yeah,
that's a drug.
Right.
And I thought he was saying Molly.
That's what I thought Josh was saying maybe before we started the show. Are we covering? He's like, do you have any Molly stories? I'm like, what? The drug? No, I don't have any Molly.
We're talking about the country just north of Burkina Faso and east of Mauritania.
Thank you, Captain Geography.
That's
In
right.
West Africa, is that, Doug?
So the military is losing emails. Microsoft lost its keys. It's a very big story this week. So I'm not going to get, a lot of people are getting the nitty gritty details, right? But like essentially, Microsoft found that attackers were using that consumer MSA key to forge tokens that allowed them to break into enterprise boxes, assuming on their cloud. Microsoft said it was because of a validation error in Microsoft code. I'm not quite, that could mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's a very vague statement. I want to talk about the debate as to whether or not this is a 0-day threat or classified as a 0-day threat, because I think we need to separate classification for stolen or lost keys to something probably pretty close to a 0-day. Now, I will make the argument that I think this is worse than a 0-day in my opinion, because an attacker with the right stolen keys can basically forge software or in
drivers.
this case of the cloud, forge tokens. Forge tokens that in my mind are much more reproducible and stable than say like a 0-day exploit for a buffer overflow vulnerability. Like there's also protections against exploits of the buffer overflow variety. Let's keep it to that, right? Albeit there's no workarounds, but there's still some kind of protection. Like if an attacker has a key, it's much tougher in my opinion to defend against than some other kind of 0-day vulnerability. So like this didn't get the 0-day alarm, from Microsoft. They didn't have to classify it as that, but in my mind, this should be even worse when someone loses a key.
I agree.
Well, since you're bringing it up,
this is the
Paul,
heart of the
and
supply
since
chain tech.
Yes.
Since you're bringing it up, and I like to nitpick on the meanings of words, is it proper to say O-day vulnerability or O-day attack?
To me, those are, well, maybe 3 different
And
things.
I'm not trying to nitpick, but we used to call these types of things attacks. Somewhere along the line, O-Day became a popular term because originally it was theoretical. What happens when there's an O-Day? But now it's become sort of the buzzword, at least within the community of vendors within our industry that are, trying to protect against
I agree.
O-Day types of circumstances. But, sometimes they're just attacks. Somebody figured out a clever way to exploit something that isn't necessarily by definition of it's a weakness. So it fits the definition of vulnerability, but it doesn't fit the definition of vulnerability in what's come to be the popular interpretation of that word. Yeah, usage.
Jeff,
I define it.
Jeff,
I define it as if you discover a vulnerability and no one knows about it, you haven't disclosed it, that's a 0-day vulnerability. If you write an exploit for it, that's a 0-day exploit. And then, like, if you use it in an attack, I agree with you, Jeff. That's an attack, and whether you're using a 0-day in an attack is irrelevant. It's being actively exploited, and it's an attack.
And if the exploit is automated, then it's a threat in today's vernacular.
If it comes from a nation state, it's an advanced persistent threat.
Now we're starting to peel away the layers of the onion.
Yes.
I have so much better understanding now.
I'm glad we clarified that.
What if it comes from Mali? Would that be advanced?
Only if they're on Molly, then it's more advanced.
If you're on Molly, you won't care.
If you're not on Molly and it comes from Molly, that's advanced.
Right. That too.
Yep.
But I still think a key leak I think it deserves a separate classification because it's not, I don't know, the article talks about it like in the context of 0-day. I don't think they're saying it's a 0-day exploit or vulnerability, but they're saying it's comparable. My argument is worse. I mean, there are certain keys that if lost could be a really bad for like most people. Like
effectively, it's a non-malicious insider attack, right?
Yeah,
well, I think it has something to do with where we've got a little bit of some sort of fatigue in terms of a lot of the terminology that we use, because O-Day used to be sort of the worst thing that could possibly happen. That was the worst classification ever because it was something that was out there that the source, the vendor, or whatever whatever entities associated with the vulnerability didn't know about it yet. But I think but because it's become such a buzzword in terms of so much technology and solutions, I think what I'm hearing you say, Paul, is there's a certain amount of fatigue and ho-hum. It's another O-Day. How many of those come out, every day and every week, and we'll just wait for the next patch cycle and we'll be good. You're saying, no, this is more. This is more serious and should garner more attention and focus and response.
Yeah. And some will argue with me that we could classify key, like lost or stolen key, attacks or scenarios or incidents, I should say, we should classify them the same way because the response is the same. I mean, essentially, you're going to apply a software update, whether that's updating a key revocation list or re-signing software or what have you, that the response is very similar to applying a software update. So it doesn't deserve a different classification because the response is essentially the same. But I think the response is different because the key is not software, right? So we can't say it's a software supply chain vulnerability, Josh, right? Because it's a key is not software. A key is just a bunch of data, basically.
No, but it's a key.
It's essential
into a supply chain software attack, into a supply chain attack of some kind.
Correct.
Just like an O-Day is a vulnerability that when used is an O-Day attack. This is I'm trying to think. I like your point about renaming it. It's a different classification. It is not an exploit. It is a stolen object that allows you access to something that if you add an attack to, like SolarWinds,
Yeah.
They broke into the upgrade server.
But a stolen key allows you to forge software and perhaps
Yes.
conduct a supply chain attack. Therefore, maybe the detection is slightly different. Although, looking for a key signature that is of a stolen key is kind of very similar to vulnerability scanning, right? Here I'm arguing against myself. I mean, I think a lot of the vulnerability scanning type products will detect that this software was signed with a key that's been stolen, kind of thing, which is a pretty basic level check, right? You just comparing some hashes or whatever the cryptographic operation is for comparison, but I still think it's different. It should be classified different.
I got a couple more thoughts on this, Paul, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with you, but I think part of what might be the issue that you're trying to highlight is that cryptographic vulnerabilities, weaknesses, exploits, thefts, sort of get a special category, I think, in our industry because very often there's a lot more work involved with some sort of cryptographic weakness. I remember having the argument when we were at Tenable when NIST came out and deprecated SSL and said everybody's got to start using TLS 1.1 or 2 or whatever it was, and PCI actually pushed an entire new version of their standard like 3 months after they'd released it because of the need to deprecate SSL. And they came out and said, okay, nobody's using SSL anymore. That's it. You don't pass, you don't become compliant if SSL is anywhere within your card data environment. And of course they had to come out a few months after that because they got so much pushback and allow a little bit of wiggle room. But I remember having an argument with Renee about what's really at risk here, how because there's so much complex work involved to actually exploit the weaknesses that have been discovered in SSL that are, it's been 10 years probably. It's a little bit more doable now, but back then there's still a little bit of work involved with very little return. You're only going to compromise a single session and so on and so forth. And I've had similar discussions with Renault and others over the years about things like that in terms of cryptographic, weaknesses and vulnerabilities, collisions in some of the hashing algorithms and things like that. I think that's part of it. But I also wonder, related to that, if part of the reason, what I keep getting from you is the lack of attention, as it were, the lack of urgency to do something about this might have to do with, I'm wondering and interested in what others think, but because actually exploiting this is probably more of a manual process. There's more work involved. It's not so readily packaged into an exploit or a bot that's just going to be out there that people can figure out the signature or the whatever they're using to detect the activity and squash it and because there's more work involved, they're like let's not draw too much attention to it or something like that.
Yeah, I think that you would take that on a case by case basis. Where I deal with it most often in my line of work is in firmware. And if there is a key that is lost, that means you can create your own firmware that's malicious and it'll check out. Well, creating your own firmware is not the most simplistic task out there, depending on what the device is. Yeah, it's not trivial.
That's not trivial. And if someone did it, how would it be readily detected? That it would take some work to detect that it's
right
because it's legitimate. It's using the real keys. How would you detect it? And I suspect that would be difficult or complex, and therefore the detections for whatever product that's out there at whatever level is trying to detect it would have a hard time detecting it.
Yeah. Also,
so I wonder,
there's less compensating controls for a lot of the cryptographic or key loss style attacks. When we talk about regular software, there's compensating controls. Oh, the vulnerability is in this feature, so if you turn off that feature, you're not vulnerable. And you can probably do that in a lot of cases, let's say, right? Even if it's half the cases that are out there. But if it's a key that's lost, there's really no feature you can turn off. Attackers are able to forge in this case tokens, in sometimes forged software that runs on your system, there's not as often a chance where you can like configure your way out of being vulnerable to that.
That's not entirely true. You know, they the Reddit link that I just posted in Discord actually has some interesting responses from Jason Hart's Reddit. It's a design flaw compounded by an infrastructure flaw, tricking a system into generating a new private key, sharing a key across several services, and key management systems that blindly accept sudden new keys. You know,
so it's more, so it's not that someone penetrated Microsoft systems and stole the key. They tricked Microsoft systems into generating valid keys, which means it's more of a software problem or configuration problem on Microsoft's back end than it is a breach where keys were lost. Yeah, it's a process problem. Yeah, architecture.
That's fair. Design problem. That's to me that's an equivalent of it's a process problem. There's a way that the system works, and somebody figured out, hey, I can do it too.
I agree entirely.
Yep. But I think, sum it up, I think probably the reason why it's not garnering as much attention as you'd like, Paul, is because there's no quick fix. And reclassifying it or relabeling it or coming up with a DEFCON 6 isn't necessarily going to fix that fundamental problem that there's no quick fix.
Right. And also, I don't want people to be overly concerned about or like misprioritize some of the doomsday key loss scenarios either, because they're likely going to be very rare. Like, we don't know how Microsoft protects the keys for Secure Boot and Microsoft Windows Update. And it's not just one key. I mean, there's obviously, multiple keys involved, but we don't really hear about that because they don't want to disclose how they're protecting them, because then people will try and use that against them, right? And
to
further that too, like Intel has keys and they're well protected. Yeah, they're well protected by large organizations because there's an incentive to protect those keys. So to reclassify things and re-architect your entire security program over something that is not as it's a risk scenario, right? Not as likely to happen because of all the reasons I just listed. Probably not. However, there's multiple keys that can be lost from multiple different parties, and I think we just need to make sure we're paying attention to those and tabletopping them in incident response to make sure that you have some kind of response. Now, unfortunately, Josh, back to your mentioning supply chain, oftentimes, like, it's way out of your control, even the response part of that, because if someone else loses a key, I have no control over that. Someone else upstream lost a key, I don't control their security of their network and systems. I'm just a victim of the fact that I lost a key. So not much I can do. I guess on my side, there are some things you can do, but make sure you do them and just don't turn a blind eye. Again, this is kind of my world, because I wrote the blog post a few weeks ago about the Intel keys to the kingdom, as I called it, right, and all the different keys that are on your system. And even I was astonished as I was researching that blog, just how many keys are in play for different functions within the firmware that is underneath your operating system that drives things like your TPM and other things. So if those keys and or firmware becomes compromised, it's problematic. You know what else is problematic? When
we're sufficiently beaten.
You pwn yourself and then sell access to your own machine and without knowing. Did you read this article? Which one is it on my list? It is near the bottom, I think. Prominent threat actor accidentally infects own computer with info stealer. I titled this as "Oops, I pwned myself again." So it turns out while infecting computers, Citrix accidentally infected his own computer and likely ended up selling it without noticing. And I believe what they mean there is this person's in the business of compromising machines and then
building bot
selling
networks.
access to those machines.
Yeah.
Right?
They said that he's been active on Russian-speaking cybercrime forums since 2020, offering access to hacked companies and info stealer logs from active infections, all with Citrix VPN and RDP servers.
Like that's business on the criminal cyber underground, for lack of a better term, that is commonplace today. But this person must have installed the software on their own computer, and it automatically checked in the C2 server, and then he sold.
He said, "I've got access to this IP.
Someone
Would you
bought it.
like
And I think
access
dumped
to it?"
The link had dumping his own. He dumped his own credentials, which then gives you access to like the entire infrastructure of everything he's pwned.
Yeah,
Still a process failure.
Mm-hmm.
What's really fun about this story is the threat intelligence company says that it has knowledge of thousands of hackers who accidentally infected their own computers with malware, and says it's forwarded the uncovered evidence to the relevant law enforcement agencies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and that makes perfect sense, Aaron, that let's say U.S. law enforcement of some kind, or spy agencies, or intelligence services, if you want to know what's going on and you want to know who's hacking into what, the best thing to do is to hack in their computers and watch them.
well, yeah.
And so this has been going on probably since the dawn of computing. Like, this is one of the best ways to get intelligence. And no one wants to talk about it, because if you tip your hand, then everyone's going to go looking, and I make sure I'm not pwned, which I'm sure they are, and it's a constant cat and mouse game. But that's how, when we see statements that are made publicly that in this process, there was no known hacking activity to protect this process, right? We can say that sometimes with great confidence because we were on people's systems watching, going, no, you're not hacking our election, right? I mean, that was my take on the election hacking back in 2016 or whatever, or whatever it was, 2020. Like, that's how we roll. No one really talks about that stuff or admits to any of that stuff because it's secrets.
And they also have the enigma problem of they don't want to they don't want to reveal that they have access, so they can't necessarily act on the information they get because they're always going to be saving it for something really good.
Yes.
So they just
Jeff really drove that point home with me years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more the purple problem than the enigma problem.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, purple was far more. Yeah, they were having to let all these attacks occur because they knew the Japanese would figure out that they had broken.
It's exactly that.
Well, and the case that's known publicly was when they figured out the architect of Pearl Harbor, General Yamamoto. They figured out he was flying on a plane from point A to point B, and they wanted to go get him, and they had to figure out a way to do it to not tip the Japanese that they had, had intel and intercept that they'd read.
Well, that was in the Code Girls. That was in the Code Girls book as well from World War II, where they would crack codes and go, "This is where the ships are." And they're like, "Well, if we did that, the only way the enemy would go, wait, the only way we know the U.S. would know where those ships are is if they broke our code. Right. So let's change the code." Yeah.
That's the Coventry problem. They bumped Coventry, and the only way to know if you crack the same idea.
Yeah.
Which, again, I've said before, what makes things highly classified, top secret, and compartmented is not necessarily the data or the information itself. It's what we call methods and sources. How are you getting that information?
Right.
Something's attacking Jeff.
I know. I'm going to swat it, but
you're very stoic about it. It was like something the size of a bat was flying around your head.
It was a hornet.
Oh, it was a hornet. Yeah, well, I admire your stoicism then.
I know, right? I would have ran.
Well, that wouldn't be that easy.
There is and this article speaks to this trend as well, of attackers going after water treatment facilities, which, I mean, it's a target. We know it's a target, and we've talked about
TeamViewer.
Yeah, we talked about TeamViewer. We've talked I don't know why TeamViewer is always, when we talk about water treatment, TeamViewer is always in the conversation for whatever reason. I feel like we don't talk about
that one water treatment plant. They used it to raise the sodium hydroxide.
That was in Florida. That was in Florida, but now it's come up in several water treatment facility articles.
That's because water treatment companies don't have money for security or even for basic IT needs.
They have money for TeamViewer.
Well, and they don't have regulatory or compliance requirements for the most part.
And there's a cajillion of them. I mean, there's like, every little town has its own water group that has this kind of water treatment stuff, and they're not coordinated, and they're not controlled and regulated, so it's just chaos.
This one's interesting, and I don't know how many other cases, but I feel like in other cases this has also been the scenario, again, with water treatment facilities that, the other story was the waste treatment facility, separate from your water, but your sewage treatment facility was hacked. In Australia, there's that like a crazy story where the former contractor or employee was hacking back into the systems and dumped a whole bunch of sewage out in Australia. That's been covered on like countless podcasts. This one's kind of similar, where the employee had left remote access. I don't know if it was sent TeamViewer. I'm just going to assume it's TeamViewer, and had left access and went in and started mucking with the water system. And this one, I believe, is in California.
Water treatment, it could have just as well been PC Anywhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of this stuff's super old.
Oh, a Massachusetts company that was contracted by the town of Discovery Bay to operate its water treatment. So Discovery Bay was California towns. They turned off critical systems and could have endangered public health and safety. They don't know why this person turned. I'm assuming he was pissed off about something.
Usually is.
Usually.
Or crazy, or who knows what, or just malicious.
But again, when you're hard pressed to run a company where 100% of your employees, when they become former employees, are happy about leaving. It's sometimes that's completely out of your control. People can have a bad day. People can have mental health issues. Whatever the case may be, it's you can't run your company or organization like water treatment facility and go, everyone that leaves here is going to be perfectly happy because we run an awesome company. You can't have that mindset. You got to be like, look, when people leave, we have to remove all the access because we never know what can happen. There's too many variables outside of your control. And I think some people kind of get complacent with that and go, oh, well, people that leave here, they're always going to leave on their own accord. They're not going to be pissed off because we treat our employees very well. Uh-huh. And you should do that, and that's admirable. But you got to, again, so many variables are outside of your control. When someone leaves, you have to have a process in place. If you're small and under budget, or both, that process might be manual, and you can't get lazy about it, right? As you get larger, you can afford the luxury of tools and automation, process, and more resources into when people leave, and tracking all of their access, which is what you do while they're there, and then turning it off once they leave, right? Because that's usually the case is, you go to Bob and you say, well, Mary left. Can you just disable all of her access? And Bob goes, yeah, I think she had access to like that system and this account and this over here. But they don't it's probably good enough. Like Mary would never do
that. I mean, there was back when we first started auditing Sarbanes stuff. I was doing a lot of utilities, and this company I was working for was buying these utilities, and it was unbelievable. They had no controls at all around people.
When someone left, they would do
people
nothing.
Separating. Part of it was that naivete of nobody ever leaves in a huff, and
no one would ever do anything bad.
We never fire whole staffs because they got bought out or whatever, and those people go home, and they of course have infinite knowledge of the systems, but they had very few controls, and it's tough to control. I mean, this was a company that had hundreds of thousands of employees scattered across the globe.
Oh yeah,
and some of these people would come on, and especially now with cloud, you'll see these operators come on board, and the operators living in Utah controlling something that's in Pennsylvania or Germany, and you don't really know who they are. You've never met them, and then that person leaves, or they change, or worse, they were changing jobs. We had people that were, they weren't even, it was nothing hostile. Somebody that's in this department says, oh, I want to try this job over in engineering, and they change jobs. Yep. Well, their roles completely change, and they should no longer have access to all these things they had access to. But you got shared passwords, you've got all kinds of crazy stuff, and they just have almost nothing. And they had the resources to do something about this. But they just didn't.
It often would get left behind when someone transferred, because if that person, you transferred from Department A to Department B, you're working in Department B, but you leave the access to Department A in case someone has a question like, can you go back into that system and fix that thing and then document it, for me? But I want to leave your access in case you need to do it again, right?
Yep.
That's how it happens. Depress you?
Yes.
Okay, so the generation before us was not the most technically savvy.
Hey,
this generation.
You mean my
curmudgeons
generation
here on the show?
Would that generation before us be boomers? And
No, you're a boomer.
Am I a boomer? I'm not a boomer.
Nah, you're Gen X.
Gen X. I was gonna say we're Gen X, and before us is boomer, right? Right?
Yeah.
Is that, did I get that right? I always screw it up.
When Gen X retires, which is happening and continues to happen, but when the technical Gen X retires, some of them are going to have dementia. And if somebody goes, "Hey, I work for your company. I need you to log back in and do some stuff," catch them at the right time, they'll do it. It's not even their fault.
Yes.
So I guess
yes.
My point is that in generations prior, you couldn't do that. They didn't have access. They didn't know the technology to do that.
And we had recovered contractors too, that are recovered employees that became contractors, where, like you say, they would leave amicably. Maybe they took another job, and then the company would call them and say, "Oh, hey, nobody really knows how to manage." Like the example I always give is there's AS400, and the company didn't know how to manage it. They didn't have anybody else that was still there, but this thing still had a massive number of customer information pieces in it. And this woman who left, they first hired her back as a contractor to assist with this AS400 administration. And then
was it running DB2? Was it DB2? AS400?
It was running DB400. And,
okay.
DB2 was on the mainframe. 400 ran. I think you could put DB2.
I think you could, yeah.
But DB400
the one
was
instance I worked for a retail technology company for retail stores, right? And there was an AS400. I believe it ran.
Okay.
DB2.
Well, they were running DB400,
but it was like you could get a lot of people at that time, right, that knew Solaris and Windows, but you get less people that know OS400 and even DB2.
They let this person no longer lived near the facility, and they let her take the AS400 home.
What?
And she was running it out of her basement, and this had been, say, 5-7 years before, and she had separated. She no longer had a contract, but she was still running it. And we saw it because we saw traffic. We were tracking all this traffic, and I was like, "What is this? It's going to an IP address that's not in this state." And they were like, "We don't know what it is." And so we started pinging it. We started scanning it, and I figured out that it was an AS400. I said, "Did you ever have an AS400?" And they said, "Yeah, we used to have one." And this girl named Carol, she was running. I'm using a different name, but she was running it. And I'm like, "Well, it seems to still exist." And they're like, "Well, it's probably in the old server room." So we went over there, not there. So I'm like, and it's weird. The IP addresses are off-site. So we actually called her at her new address in another state and said, "Hi, we're trying to track this AS400 down." And she's like, "Oh yeah, it's here." And I'm like, "Are you still running it?" And she's like, "Oh yeah." She's like, I love this thing. It's my favorite machine." And
people like that.
And she's literally being a sysop on this thing for free. And nobody wants to ask any questions about it, but she has complete access to just a massive amount of internal data.
She has no contract.
She has no
whatsoever.
NDA.
Yeah.
She has no nothing, and she's just doing it out of the goodness of her heart. And it's like,
because it was like her baby. Yeah, we get these technology things like, "Oh, it's my baby."
It was very unpopular though when we brought this up, because they said, we're getting all this free admin stuff, and you're going to ruin that, and then we'll have to hire an administrator.
Yeah,
and I'm like, imagine that. But the CEO only makes $40 million a year and gets a $10 million bonus for a job well done. So how on earth could we ever afford another administrator?
This is true.
Part of the problem with a water utility, I think, is that it doesn't fit what's become the paradigm in our industry, which is mostly focusing on data protection, data loss. The C in the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We have a harder time justifying an investment in security because we don't think a water utility has any data worth stealing. And we don't do that much of focusing on availability. Ironically, and Paul, you mentioned that you used to work for a retail. I would guess most, if not all, water utility companies that have customers that are paying a water bill. Probably the vast majority of them, you can pay for that water bill with a credit card. And so PCI's got to be in there somewhere, and which would give them a framework for doing all the things that we've been discussing for the last 10, 15 minutes about, basic security hygiene and protections like disabling and removing the accounts of former employees. That's a PCI requirement.
Oh, that wasn't
It should be.
Drops mic. It is.
Oh, no, I know it is. But people don't enforce that stuff.
It should be applied. It's as a security framework. It could be used at any of these critical infrastructure companies that have a retail side of things in terms of there's consumers that are paying for their services. Part of the problem with PCI is you're allowed to isolate things, and so you don't have to do all that security stuff everywhere else. But boy, if somebody would figure out, well, we could do it, and here's the model, here's the guide right here, it's already in their hands.
But somewhere under 51st and Lexington, there's a little tiny fluorescent lit room with a guy named Rocco sitting in front of a gateway computer from 1993 that's controlling 16 different valves, and nobody even really remembers the guy's there, but he gets a paycheck every week. I mean, those I've done a bunch of stuff.
Does he have a red stapler?
Probably, yeah, and some really thick glasses, and looks a lot like Stephen Root. But
and the computer's still sitting on the cow box.
Well, I got this rude awakening to this stuff. I was for the Y2K stuff. I went around. I was looking at all these gas and water companies because people were saying that the end of the world was coming, and we were looking at their infrastructure, and it was like that. They're like, oh yeah, that's Rocco. He's down there in that little room. You go down there, go off the subway platform, and climb down there, and go down the tunnel about 30 yards, and there's a door. Knock on that 3 times, and a guy named Vic will let you in. And then you go down 3 flights of stairs, and there's a guy that sits in this little room for 8 hours a day and manages all that. And like, how does it work? Like, we don't know, but it works. Don't mess with it. And I mean, and that's the way that infrastructure stuff and why it's so scary, because it's so decentralized sometimes, and it's so, it just works. Don't mess with it. Leave it alone. It's been there for 500 years in London, and there's probably a guy named Rocco in London somewhere that still has to turn a valve every day to, make sure the water starts. And
right.
And worse, he's probably Irish.
Yeah, probably.
Oh my gosh, you can't say that.
Do you remember the silver mine that the VAX is still running?
The what?
There's a VAX running a silver mine.
Well, I'm not
The mine
surprised.
trucks.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
Vaxes never die.
Well, this is living proof.
You can't stop a vax. It's impossible.
So
I'm pretty sure the HAL 9000 was a VAX.
Probably.
What's that?
HAL 9000 was built on the VAX platform.
That's great. No, but like in critical infrastructure, especially physically based, like a train, a water, a mine, if it works, they don't fix it.
And they don't update it. They just let it sit there.
And they don't update it.
And every day Rocco comes in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he pushes the F1 key, and a whole bunch of scripts run. All the lights come on, and he sits back and reads a porno magazine for the next 4 hours.
Hey, he reads the sports page first.
Well, he also read the racing forums.
He reads it for the articles.
Yeah, of course. He already tore all the pictures out and stuck them on the wall.
For us younger folks, pornography used to come in a magazine. Magazines that you...
Yeah.
They would
this
be
thing
in
they
the
called
store.
a centerfold.
They were in the store, and remember they used to have like the
What's a
plastic...
magazine?
Mm-hmm.
The plastic
What's a
shield over the cover.
You mean that thing you think that thing I put in my AR-15, that kind of magazine?
No, not that.
Right, yeah.
Not that magazine. Like
Don't use a term that
it's like a book, except like it was
audience.
bigger and less pages and more pictures.
Right. And a book is a big collection of paper that's been
Right.
bound together.
It was bigger than a
feel
book.
so old now.
I know.
You're assuming I know what a book is. You're not helping yourself, Paul.
No. Tell me about Worm GPT. Or should we wait till Lee gets here? Because I think Lee had the story too. Lee should be here
let's
soon.
hold
on. Let's wait for Lee. Let's talk about Ashley Madison.
Somebody run ChatGPT and tell us what Lee would be saying about Worm GPT.
What would Lee say?
So this is a 2-part series, I believe it was run by Krebs on Security. This one was titled SEO Expert Hired and Fired by Ashley Madison Turned on the Company Promising Revenge, which kind of goes along with our theme of the last story. of where we talked about employees leaving and then enacting revenge. So this is part 2, and it was reporting that went into a new Hulu documentary series on the 2015 Ashley Madison hack. And I do have to say, like, I know we covered it when it came out on the show. It's one of those hacks that the more the time goes on and we reflect on it, we get more and more of the picture, because I also think court documents get released over time as well. So we get more information. And I think part of the, what do they call it in court documents when there's information associated with the case and then it gets released publicly? I feel like there's terminology.
Disclosure,
yeah,
disclosure.
Discovery. The discovery. There's
discovery.
Yeah, and so that stuff becomes public, and then oftentimes that's a lot of information, right? You've done casework, and usually journalists go through it and they like write about it, and then we get documentary movies and we get podcasts that are kind of creating a better story. Or more
based on
details,
a true story,
based on like more details about the story, that now when we're talking about it 8 years later, that I was like, wow, I didn't know all that happened in the story. And that's this Krebs article. And now I want to go watch the Hulu documentary because I think it's interesting. So like we were there, and
so
in the
that was
beginning
a long
we just had
time
speculation.
ago.
8 years?
Remember it. I don't remember anything about it. What somebody refresh our memory. What was the original Ashley Madison hack? I know they got like their entire user database was compromised, but how?
It was apparently an insider that leaked that information from with this
So it
article.
wasn't really a hack. It was just an evil maid attack, and the guy the guy actually disclosed all this stuff because he was angry.
Right, because he was angry.
Yeah,
correct.
So it was a process failure. Okay.
But a lot of people committed suicide as a result of that attack. Like there's some really, and when you read this article, I mean, there is just creepy behavior like all around. Like all that, like Ashley Madison seems like it was totally crooked and corrupt and created bots that emulated females that interacted with the platform. And it was
95% of the female accounts were fake.
Right.
Bots.
right.
But also, I mean, they ran a site for people that wanted to cheat on their spouses. So, like, there's that moral and ethical and values that were completely missing from that. And so, I mean, they would make arguments for themselves, like, oh, we're just providing the platform for it. But the whole thing seemed shady. The employee that turned had a criminal background that apparently was never checked by Ashley Madison, that did shady SEO work before that and shady SEO work while they were there. The whole thing was just shady. It's just a cesspool. I mean, it's not really worth covering on the show. Like, go read the article and watch the documentary. It just seemed like the whole thing was a cesspool.
And there was another one this week too. There was a story about this thing called 419 dating, chat, and flirt.
Yes,
that ended up involving a whole bunch of Chinese clone sites that were basically clones of the source code for this site, and this was an open Bitbucket. So they had a S3 Bitbucket, and the report basically said they didn't know if anybody stole it, but basically the data was just sitting out there and had all the customers' names, their emails, their account numbers, their geolocation data, and all kinds of stuff that was just sitting there in the open. And then, of course, as they started investigating this, the company said, oh, no, we're the only one. These others are separate. But then they found they all had the exact same source code, and there's a whole pile of them. There was one that was just like there was one like Meet You local dating app and speed dating app for American, which was my favorite. Like, you must be really desperate if you're signing up and loading apps that are like bad English kind of stuff. But, hey, when you need to speed date, you need to speed date, right? And
this raises an interesting question. We usually talk about PII, personally identifiable information, but every once in a while we talk about PPI, personal private information. Is the simple fact that you would have an account on some site that you would be embarrassed if your spouse or some circle of friends or your employer knew that you had an account on that site, is that officially documented anywhere as a category of PPI?
I don't know, but Gauss just
and I don't know that it is.
Discord.
If not,
wait.
Why are we talking about it?
I got to tell you this. Gauss just put on Discord that LinkedIn is just FetLife Business Edition.
Also, I just want to point out something from the article or the Ashley Madison thing that Harrison is the guy that worked there that turned. He was also a self-styled rapper who claimed to be an active menace to corporate America.
You've gone to YouTube and you've got his latest video.
No,
and we're going to watch it right now.
They post some of the, because I still surf the net all night and day. I can't stay away. They don't make too many hackers like me, bona fide hustler, certified G. And there's, I mean, you can, okay. Yes. The hacker backstaged was also his rapper alter ego, Chaos Dog. I mean, if you had to have a rapper alter ego, like Chaos Dog is kind of, that's catchy.
I've never felt the need for a rapper alter ego, but maybe I
think we should all have rapper alter egos.
Save that for our ChatGPT discussion.
Yes. ChatGPT can certainly
give us all our rapper handles.
Ooh, that's an idea. You put up a lot of fake information about yourself so that ChatGPT will be completely confused when it tries to research you.
Well, that's the thing even without ChatGPT.
Well, yeah, it is. So you just put up, I can be like a whole fake rap
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Should we start a service where people could say, look, I'm going to pay you. I want you to confuse the crap out of ChatGPT. Dilute. This is reputation dilution.
Yes.
There you go. Did you call it reputation dilution?
ChatGPT, write me
I like that.
Write me a rap song about reputation dilution.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, a lot of people have made careers out of it in SEO, right? Search engine optimization. Yeah. So that's all it is. It sounds good. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
It's reverse.
If Larry were here,
he'd be how to make people not find you.
We got to register lots of domains.
Lots of domains. I'll get right on
just going back to the Ashley Madison thing, it wasn't Insider. I had a memory that it was much more fun than that. But it goes on about sort of hard-coded security credentials, including database passwords, API secrets, authentication tokens, and SSL private keys. So it was much more fun than an Insider.
So what was it an Insider or not? Because the article makes it seem like...
No, this seems to say that they did some password cracking on it, and it has some.
Thank you for the correction, Aaron. So this employee did turn on Ashley Madison, but they weren't the source of the breach. The source of the breach was still external.
Yeah.
8 years is a long time. I don't remember all the.
Yeah, that was. I remember it, but it was a while ago.
It was.
I remember thinking about signing up for it, but I wasn't married or anything at the time, so it would have been useless.
Well, yeah, it was.
Well, I don't know if that was a requirement, but
it wasn't a requirement, but it was specifically focused on people who wanted to cheat on. Yes. Yeah, that was the whole point of it. Was that I want to cheat. If
you're not married, do you have privacy concerns?
Was the point not that it turned out that most of it was bots anyway, so it was just like dirty old men talking to bots?
Yeah.
And dirty old women as well, maybe.
Or dirty old bots.
Dirty old people.
Bots. Or was it dirty old bots talking to dirty old bots?
Yeah, I'm wondering how many of the bots are just talking to themselves. It's just like giant bot masturbation circle.
I mean, the bots get bored. They had to talk to
Maybe
someone.
Somebody should get ChatGPT an account on Ashley Madison.
There you go.
And that'll keep ChatGPT
ChatGPT will spend all day in its room every day.
We won't have to worry about AI anymore.
That's right. It won't pose a threat to
Once
humanity.
AI learns about porn.
That's right. And problem solved.
But obviously now that Elon Musk has gotten into AI, he doesn't think it's as dangerous anymore. That's a bit strange, right?
Oh, yeah. Imagine that.
He only thought it was dangerous when he wasn't controlling it.
Convenient.
Yeah.
Now it's totally
fine. Just did a show tune for us to put in Discord.
Ooh, what is it?
Are you going to sing it?
Yeah, because you want me to sing it.
And now,
I do.
Right.
And now,
I want you to sing it.
Josh will perform a show tune for
I
the
want you to
audience.
rap it.
Rap, climb every mountain.
I will only perform a show tune if you issue earplugs to all the listeners. There's no flipping way you want to hear me sing.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready.
I'm ready.
You wouldn't believe some of the clubs I've been in.
Yeah, they're
I used to
mostly
bounce on Bourbon Street.
Germany.
Well, those too, but I've been on other clubs too. Like, hey, everybody, my girlfriend's going to come out and sing one now.
Oh God!
I want to talk about, because I don't want to necessarily hear. Well, I don't want our listeners to be tortured by Josh singing, because I love our
That'll
listeners.
be a special edition.
But my story number 23, along the lines of like big kind of headlines and criminal activity, Silk Road's second in command gets 20 years in prison. Now, this transpired even before Ashley Madison.
Ago.
This is 2012.
Yeah, that's an ancient story.
Yeah.
Feels harsh, doesn't it?
So this person was pretty elusive for some time. Is that true, if I remember the article correctly? Where is their handle and stuff like that? So also nobody's online handles. Variety Jones.
Yep.
That was the popular one. Sentenced to 20 years behind bars for his role in building and running Silk Road. Clark, a 62-year-old Canadian national, will now likely spend much of the rest of his life incarcerated for helping pioneer an anonymous cryptocurrency-based model for online illegal drug sales and contraband. I just feel like they throw the book at anyone that was involved with Silk Road.
Yeah, don't mess with capitalism.
Is that the
It's the poster child for underground marketplaces. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it was the first time that really came up. Like,
it's like,
you know,
don't start. It's sending a message. Don't start in underground marketplace, or we're just going to throw the book at you. And we have to throw the book at these two people. Was it Aaron? I get it confused. Who was the other? Aaron Schwartz. I get that right?
Aaron Leland? What?
No, Aaron Schwartz. Right?
I don't remember the name even. It's been so long.
There's a good movie. Documentary.
Yeah, it's on. It come up on Netflix again recently. He was the young guy with autism from the UK. Was he not the one actually that stopped NotPetya or something because he registered the domain name?
Guy, yeah.
No.
He's too young.
Different person.
I know that guy. He's too young.
Or was it Ross? Was it Ross Ulbricht?
That's Dread Pirate Roberts.
No, Ross Ulbricht is condemned to die in prison for creating an anonymous e-commerce website called Silk Road. Aaron Schwartz was a different one, right?
That was he was AT&T.
Yeah, I get those two confused.
Or JSTOR.
I always get those two confused. I apologize to the listeners. I should learn to keep this stuff straight. Aaron Schwartz was the hacker who killed himself before he went to prison. No. Yes.
Oh yeah, Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yes. There's a documentary about Aaron Schwartz as well. But Silk Road was, who did I say it was?
Ulbricht.
Ross Ulbricht, who's in prison for life because of it. Yeah. I get those two names confused in my brain. Anyway, Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome. Oh, Lee, I think you're on mute. I don't know if you're on mute.
I thought I was unmuted.
There you are. Now you're unmuted.
What's up, Lee? How are you, man?
There we go. Cheers.
Cheers. We were just talking about confusing people, how I confuse people in my brain, and I think we got it sorted. So,
all right. I heard some of that.
Yeah. But also, the point I wanted to make was I think it's unfair that they throw the book at all the people involved with Silk Road. Now, there's also two sides to every story, right? There was the Ross Ulbricht putting a hit out on people kind of thing, which is very a separate offense, obviously, than running a criminal underground, which in his mind and others involved were providing a safe place to buy drugs versus going off to the street. Like there's this whole philosophy behind it that people are going to buy drugs. They might as well buy it in a safer place, and we're going to crowdsource, like Amazon reviews, right? We're going to crowdsource the validity of the people selling on the marketplace. I get good. I didn't die when I bought drugs from this person, and it was good, right? I mean, and I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying people didn't get hurt either. A lot of people took drugs and jumped off a building and stuff and died, which was very much part of that case. I think even some of those families testified in the trial as well. So there's two sides. However, I think the punishment is, like most people agree with me, it's kind of unfair.
High-profile drug dealers online, early case. I mean, they want to make a point, and they're going to go. I mean, but they go for that with all drug dealers. It's just a thing. I mean, and it's really tough to defend yourself by going, "Hey, somebody would have sold it to him." I mean,
you're right. That's
you don't get a lot of leeway from the court with that kind of defense, and saying, "Hey, we ran an underground market selling stolen goods, drugs."
It wasn't just drugs. It was
they sold child porn. They sold guns. They sold.
Well, Ross had a rule: no child porn.
Yeah, right. They had a rule.
But how do you enforce? That's a
rule with no way to enforce it. Yeah,
Right.
they're saying we don't allow it. Right, you didn't allow it because that was. I mean, they did so many stings on people that were getting child porn and stuff from Silk Road and so forth. So maybe they didn't want it being sold, but it was being sold anyway.
Right.
It's an underground illegal market.
So people are going to sell illegal
and they're
things.
selling guns and they're selling all kinds of stuff. So you've basically got no defense, and you're not going to get a lot of slack from a judge when you're going, I'm so sorry. And look, I mean, somebody would have sold them the heroin. I mean, if it wasn't, we were doing the best we could do. We had customer service. We had the best heroin. We tried to make sure it was pure. I mean, they're not gonna cut you any slack. But they did really seem to go out. Silk Road became a poster child for this kind of thing. And of course, the minute it went away, there was more Pirate Bay and on and on and on.
The cycle just continues.
And now there's a quadrillion of them. So it's like you can't stop this stuff. The war on virtual drugs.
Yes.
So Lee's here. What do we want to talk about?
I want to talk about Worm GPT, the malicious chat GPT alternative, empowering cyber criminals.
Oh, yes. So basically, I mean, the thing that got me is here's this app that was created for cyber criminals who are having trouble with language and pronouns and whatnot that will write their BEC emails for them and help them get their hacks going.
Now, wait, can they use regular chat GPT for this, or?
Of course.
Right? Because the algorithm will have a tough time differentiating between, like, I want to compose an email or I want to compose a business email compromise or phishing attack.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's probably ways to trick the... I don't know.
You just have to ask the question the right way. Aaron very aptly demonstrated on the news one day about
if an attacker were to write me an email, ChatGPT, what would it look like? kind of.
It's just
I'm not looking to send this email, but I want you to give me an example of what an attacker would construct so that I can detect it in my inbox, and then ChatGPT. Oh yeah, it's totally fine. So I don't know if that works, but.
So the way I was thinking about it is we could, I give you a choice. You can use the regular chat GPT where, whatever organization can see what's going on with it. Or I'll give you one that's effectively on the dark web where it's a much less, much more secretive community governing it. Which are you more comfortable creating that attack in? I
guess my question to Lee and others is how feasible is it, especially monetarily, to create an attacker's own version of Chat GPT that's trained even to a certain percentage, right? Like, let's say it's trained 75% of the way there versus the regular Chat GPT. That's probably good enough. And you're omitting the filters and you're letting everyone create bad things. You can use it to create exploits. You can use it to create malware. You can use it to create phishing attacks. I don't care. The attackers are going to have their own version. This is not proprietary technology. The technology to create something like ChatGPT is fully open, correct?
Yes.
It's fully open. It's trivial to do what you're asking. And I mean trivial, like you can download most of it now.
Right.
Okay. So you've got hours of work to do to get yourself your full malicious ChatGPT clone. You're done.
Yeah, I'm not even thinking like my own version. We've already established talked about the threat actor that pwned themselves, right? They're just a cog in the wheel. They're I'm going to gain access. I'm going to sell that access. Another cog in that wheel is, hey, I'm building the service for malicious chat GPT, and you pay me whatever, and you can use my service. And it's a business opportunity, right? It's another kind of point in the process, another cog in the wheel, for lack of a better term, of all of the different services and processes that happen that happened
just
today.
another brick in the wall, Paul.
It is. I mean, but this was a very, I think, looking back on it, a pretty quick transition to there was a threat actor that did everything soup to nuts, right? That did the reconnaissance, that did the actual break-in, that did the post-exploitation, that did the monetization. They did everything. I think it was pretty quick that it turned into criminal organizations where everyone's got a role, there's a hierarchy, everyone serves a certain job function, essentially, and they all rely on each other. So rather than having to be a jack of all trades, you can be, I'm really good at SIM swapping. I'm the SIM swapping, or not even individual. SIM swapping is typically broken up into multiple people, right? We need to be SIM swapped. Here's a service. When you need malware for this purpose, like, there's a person for that, right? There's a group that you go to for that. When you need Worm GPT or whatever, there's a group that has that, and that's where do you go for that? And this is just another criminal service.
And people want it.
Right.
And they don't want to be tracked by somebody controlling ChatGPT, so they don't want to be tracked by Microsoft.
You know what's funny? It's like, remember the movie Pulp Fiction? It came on the other night. My wife and I were watching it. I'm like, first of all, I'm a huge Tarantino fan. It's an amazing, amazing film. But you remember when they call the cleaner?
Mr. Wolf.
Harvey Keitel. They called Mr. Wolf in this criminal wheel of cogs that we're describing. He's the cleaner. He comes in. You got a problem. He is on point. He's like, we got 45 minutes till the wife comes home. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. This is why you pay me the big bucks. He can get everyone cleaned up.
Exactly.
And on the way. And that's the service that he provides. And he's very good at the service that he provides. And he provides that service. Would you call him to kill someone? Would you call him to smuggle drugs? No. You call him to clean up.
Right. Very important person to have on
your speed dial if you're in the criminal underground.
Yeah.
Again.
Or if you're
we have
not.
the same people in our industry.
We do, yes. On the legitimate side, it's the same thing, Josh. You're absolutely, we operate in the same way, except above board.
Incident response.
One of my best friends, his handle is the info janitor.
Right.
Ooh.
Is his handle also the janitor, or are we talking about two different people?
No, we're talking about the same one.
Oh, same person. Okay.
Yeah. But everybody calls him janitor.
I know janitor. Yeah. But we have people we call. Even in our own circle of friends, we have people we call, right? When we're up against a particular problem or challenge or need something, our speed dial has expertise and skills like in our brains next to it, right?
Huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tell the truth, Paul. Do you have Ghostbusters in your speed dial?
I do not.
You should.
So you want to code malware in literally 10 minutes? Here we go.
Yeah, like
Worm GPT.
Who would you call?
Yeah, you call Worm GPT.
Who do you call?
I need a piece of malware that'll break into a Citrix system.
Yeah.
And, regular Chat GPT will go, oh, that would be wrong. I could do it if you word it correctly, but Worm GPT doesn't ask any questions. It goes, yeah, sure. Well, here's what you need to do.
When I'm trying to clone a hotel key card, it was my own key card for my own room. By the way, I wasn't trying to clone someone else's key card. I call Larry and or Josh. I'm like, why isn't this working? And they had the answer. Because they're like, the software for that and the Flipper Zero sucks. And
it's very good. It's just it's missing that one set.
It's not great at My Fair Classics.
No, it's the My Fair Classics are sort of some of them can work.
Yeah,
but it's hit or miss.
Yeah, there was the My Fair stuff. It's not great at, and that's what it was in this particular hotel. And I'm like, I followed all the instructions. I was reading it online, and I'm like, it says it cloned it, but it's just not emulating it correctly. And it turns out, I was in the Unleashed firmware Discord, and in their FAQ channel on that Discord server, they said the exact same thing that Larry and Josh told me. I was well, there you go.
But honestly, if I wanted to get into a Citrix
Where do you
system,
think Larry and Josh
I'd call Tyler or Virus.
Right. But if I wanted to clone RFID, this is part of the series that stuff I'm actively researching. If I want to clone RFID, I'm going to go get a Proxmark, right? Or what's the other fancier one that you have, Josh?
iCopy.
iCopy. Is that basically it's basically a Proxmark, but user friendly.
It's the equivalent of a Proxmark Pro, if you've seen that, with a much nicer user interface.
Right.
So it's the Proxmark firmware, the Proxmark mostly hardware, but it's really nice.
It's like, is it like $400 or $500, something like that?
350, 400.
350, 400. What's a Proxmark run?
Class, it's 500 and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and these are on Hacker Warehouse. I know you're affiliated with Hacker Warehouse. I love Garrett. I love the Hacker Warehouse. I was pricing these out. I'm like, this is a way better. Now, also, like, I'm not doing pen testing that requires me to clone RFID. So I'm like, I got a Flipper Zero. Let's see what I can make work, and that's kind of fun. If I did have to do more with it, I would go to Hacker Warehouse and I would buy probably both these devices, right?
And Sam is talking about how they sold a lot of those at the Hacker Warehouse booth at DEFCON last year.
Yeah, man, for sure.
And Sam, are you working Hacker Warehouse again this year or no?
I don't think this year, no.
Okay. Oh no, not. No DEFCON, Sam? Oh.
What I do,
Sore subject.
and I don't know where you fall on this, Josh and others, right? But like, I've been talking about some of the Flipper Zero stuff on social media, and I think some people are like expecting me to disagree with them, but I don't. They're like, "Well, that's just a toy. There's like way better tools out there," and like, I agree. I completely agree. Like, all of the functionality that is on this is not unique. It's not new.
No.
They've just put it in a package that I can put in my pocket.
This is the difference between carrying a Phillips head screwdriver full size
And a Swiss Army knife. Right. That's the analogy that I make. It's the Swiss Army knife. Not the best scissors. A lot of Swiss Army knives have scissors. You ever use the scissors on a Swiss Army knife?
You don't want to use the scissors.
Like,
They suck.
but like, if you don't have scissors with you, it'll cut stuff. I mean, don't be not that
You can
well.
remove stitches with it.
But yeah, like, if you cut stitches need to be removed, you'd use it. They work for the most part. They're not the best scissors. A lot of the tools
the
on here,
toothpick, though, let me tell you.
yeah, but a lot of tools on here are like the scissors on the Swiss Army knife. You can get a much better pair of scissors. You can get a Proxmark or an iCopy. Way better pair of scissors. So one of the things I'm working on is I'll be calling upon many of you, right, to kind of weigh in, like, what's the best, some of the best alternatives, right? There's multiple alternatives for what's on here. And I completely, one person I think it was on my Instagram commented like, there's way better stuff. And I looked at that person's Instagram feed, and it's hack RFs and it's software defined radio. I'm like, dude, all that stuff on your profile is way better than what's in the Flipper. I'm like, you're doing awesome stuff. Like, keep the good work. It's great.
You know, this would be a great infographic, Paul.
Yeah.
Like, at the center is the Flipper.
Yeah.
And then
and all the
every function is pulled out.
yes.
And then the special tool,
Right.
full size screwdriver for that function. That'd be pretty cool, man.
The other thing that I do like about the Flipper, and I'm not saying the other platforms don't have this, but the user base for the Flipper creates a lot of files for it that define radio transmissions, for example. So there's a lot. I mean, you can get a lot. If you scour GitHub, like I've done, you can find a lot of different files. And the first tutorial that I'm going to do for the Flipper Zero is how I like to configure my Flipper Zero. And I actually just configured this one that I'm holding right now so that it has all of those databases in it. And this is I want to bring the unknowns, right? And I think a lot of more seasoned hardware hackers and RF hackers I've got this specialized gear. I'm going after this other piece of gear that I know that I have, and they're way more skilled than I, and they're absolutely correct. Like, this is the best tool for the job. And in other words, I'm being contracted by XYZ company to evaluate this hardware platform. I've got specialized hardware that I'm using to evaluate that platform. Absolutely. However, I'm throwing databases of thousands of files in my pocket because I don't know what I'm going to find. I want to walk in a retail store and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to find. I'm like, oh, I got a file for that. Like, let's see if it works. And like, sometimes it doesn't. Again, I got the Swiss Army knife, and sometimes it doesn't cut as good.
So based on your comments, I'm thinking to myself, is this a Swiss Army knife, or is this more of a Leatherman? Because it's feeling like it's a little more refined. Because remember, the Leatherman, the things actually worked.
Yeah, I think in some cases it's a Swiss Army knife. In some cases, it's a Leatherman. It all depends on if they've worked the bugs out of whatever firmware, or it depends on your situation.
Well, I avoided saying Swiss Army chainsaw.
There you go.
Yes,
You remember that one?
Was there a Swiss Army
Jeff,
chainsaw?
what was described with that? It was a
The
while
USB
ago.
chainsaw, you mean?
No. Swiss Army chainsaw, which like one of the early descriptions of Perl or Python or one of those. It's way back. That's why I was picking Mr. Mann if he's listening, because he'd remember.
I don't remember.
Oh well, I'm forgetting stuff. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. We talked about Worms.
Let's do some news, because it sounds like a tech segment all the time.
Oh, I think Aaron and Lee both had the Mario movie malware.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite fun, actually.
Why are people so enamored with the Mario movie? Because, excuse me, it's a video game. People
it was
love
a
video games.
non-released. Look, it's the point was to me. Okay,
There's more of a
here's a movie
storyline
that's
than Star
not
Wars.
released. I'm providing you a copy to download, and guess what? I loaded it up with malware. But you're so busy thinking I can't get this anywhere else. We're back to Silk Road, except you're not. And I think my point when including is, hey, you can include malware in pretty much any file.
Like proof of
If
concept
it looks
exploit.
too good to be true.
The same category, proof of concept exploits targeting security researchers, people looking for a movie. There was a lot of I'm into like a lot of foreign films, kung fu movies and stuff. At least I used to be. I haven't actually watched a bunch of those films in a long time. Probably should get back to it. But it was the subtitle files had malware,
I remember
or
that.
I don't know if it was like an exploit or some kind of malicious payload inside the subtitle files. I know there was like a vulnerability in the renderer, like an FFmpeg or VLC that was included with the app that you were using to watch them on like an Android TV device or whatever. And so my friend Bob would tell me when he would pirate movies off the internet that were of the kung fu movie variety that were in a foreign language like Chinese, I need subtitles to watch that because I don't understand Chinese. I mean, I know certain phrases in kung fu movies, which is kind of hilarious. It's a whole other conversation. But you need subtitles, and so you'd go into like Bob would go into his there was software that lets you download movies in subtitle files. What was it called? Cody. It was Cody. Cody would go, I'll find a subtitle file, and it would have like basically metadata files that would have places it would look to download the subtitle files, and like you'd find one that would work. And some subtitle files were better than others, kind of thing. Because subtitles are like, I've watched a lot of movies with subtitles. When I used to watch a lot of kung fu movies, like, and some subtitles are better than others. And it's not just Chinese kung fu movies, but like all movies. Like it has to be one at the right pace. A lot of now more modern technology, you can adjust the size and the color of your subtitles on certain platforms, right? But if you didn't have that, it was just that's what it was. So it has to be like the right font and color and the right kind of pacing. Like they can't move too quick, otherwise you can't watch the movie because all you're doing is trying to keep up and read the subtitles. So it had to be the right pacing, but it also had to like make sense. Like some subtitles were just so horrible that I would almost want to watch it dubbed, and dubbed is a totally different.
Good day, mate.
Through that.
Oh, and dubbed kung fu
I'm a
movies
kung fu master.
and there's a whole article that I found once that talked about why all that was so bad. Like they used to dub like 10 movies a day.
Oh, yeah.
And it'd just be like two people in a room that would, I think, also make the sounds and dub the movie in real time, who didn't really understand
So it's
Chinese.
like radio.
Yeah, they didn't really understand Chinese well enough to like dub it, so they would use a lot of the same phrases for a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah,
and
just kind of guess from looking at the scene what was going on.
But subtitle files could also have malicious intent. But now, Mario movie is the one that people are after today.
So I think the most fun about this is, and exactly what you were talking about there, there's a side that's fun and a side that's not as fun as I thought it was going to be. So I thought, oh yeah, okay, so they've managed to infect people through a WMV file or an MP4 file. But that's not the fun part, because that doesn't seem like it's correct. But where Paul was just talking about now, when you download the video file, you're also getting the codecs and you're getting the subtitle files. So it seems that it's actually them that's infecting it. But it's also fun that apparently it was on Twitter for 2 days and then it disappeared, and then people went chasing it, and it was after they went chasing it to various other places is when they got infected.
Yeah, because
like they're big numbers. Yeah. They're talking millions.
Because I think it's I think attackers are looking for that perfect storm when they go after like a movie like this. And Aaron, I think you bring up a very good point in this whole kind of story, that it leaked out to Twitter and a lot of people saw it and then it went away, which drove demand to go, oh, I can watch this before it comes out in the movie theater, and I really want to see it. Because gamers represent a huge portion of the population. So they want to go watch this movie because it reminds them of the video games that we used to play that mostly Gen X would play, right? When we were little, we would play Nintendo, we'd play Mario Brothers. And so we would all want to go watch this movie. And the attackers are going after it's not necessarily in this case about the tech, it's about the need and the drive. It's an opportunity for attackers to go, oh, if we put something malicious out there, a lot of people are looking for it now because demand has driven up.
But I mean, people have been doing that as long before Gen X. I mean, that's the old Star Trek.exe thing that wiped your hard drive, that was on every bulletin board everywhere, and every Wares site that's ever existed has, I mean, I remember trying to download Antares Harmonizer. I just wanted to see what it did. I don't want to pay the $700 that I wasn't going to use it commercially. And I was looking at Wares sites, and every single version was just so full of malware. It was beyond. It actually turned into an interesting exercise to see how much malware you could collect from downloading Antares Harmonizer off of Russian Wares sites.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting.
It's the same thing with proof of concept exploits for CVEs.
We had that story last week where, it's like,
well, and this was it last week and this week?
Or maybe I did it on the news, but
I think you might have done it on the news. We didn't talk about it here, but again, I think this is another attackers taking advantage of a perfect storm and preying on the wants and needs of a certain population. Security researchers are very much after, I want to see the proof of concept exploit for this brand new vulnerability that's been announced that doesn't have a readily available proof of concept exploit. I think it was a Linux kernel one was on this list. We covered it, We covered it on the show. And the announcement that many of us saw, because it got pretty good press, is that there's a new vulnerability in the Linux kernel, and we've reported it, and we're giving the Linux community time to fix it before we release the proof of concept. Well, everyone's like, I want to see the proof of concept exploit. And I think my thinking on this was, I want to see the proof of concept exploit. I want to test it because I want to see how reliable it is so that I can gauge the response, so that I can recommend the response to other people. Is this super reliable and we need to drop everything and patch now? Or is this something where, we got like a little bit of time? It's not and I think in the risk equation, Jeff, correct me, right? This is the likelihood maybe speaks to how well this exploit may or may not work in the real world, right? I forget if that's likelihood or probability. I always get those two confused.
It's likelihood. Likelihood that it's going to be attempted
and successful, right?
There's likelihood of success, like if you're able to do it, works,
right?
But what it takes, what's involved in actually attempting it and trying to
which is the driver,
especially against a particular target.
And that's the driver behind, I want the proof of concept so I can gauge that likelihood.
Right.
But now attackers are like, oh, I can create a fake one and I can put malware
phishing 101.
I mean, it's phishing 101, preying upon the latest headline, right? How many times have we seen news articles that are like, oh, phishing attacks are happening and they're preying upon whatever the big event is in the world, or whatever the big event is even here in the U.S., and attackers are going to prey. That could be anything. It could be an election. It could be a weather event. It could be a natural disaster, whatever it is.
I put up a story that was about basically what they do is they put up websites that, you know, you're searching for Delta Airlines flights, and people are frantic, and their kids are sitting there. We're going to Disney, and the flight's canceled, and I mean everybody jumps on and tries to start finding alternatives, and this site basically has fake phone numbers, and when you call them, they transfer you to a place that goes, yes, I can help you with that. Look here, I've got a great flight.
It
Give
me your credit card
in 2 hours, and it's a little more expensive than what you're used to. It's going to be $1,200 a pop, but I can get you 4 seats on the next flight going out of Newark Airport. And this guy was writing the story. He said, you know, he called the number, and they said, you know, your flight's been canceled. Yeah, we can see that. I do have a flight that can accommodate you, but it's leaving from Newark. It's 4 hours from now. It's a lot more expensive than what you're paying. And the guy said, I was getting my credit card out because I want to do it. And I thought, this is a little odd. And then he said, I went back and searched, and I found out, this is just a fake phone number that you call, and if
it's too good to be true, it probably is.
But
that's all this. The Mario movie, the proof of concept exploit, the flight.
But it's when you're not thinking. Is what you're getting at was about, you know, I want to see this Mario movie. Right. I want to get this proof of concept. Yes. I need a flight, and you get desperate, and that's when you don't think.
I want to see Anna Kournikova. Oh. That's a classic example.
Well, yeah.
Classic example. Same thing. It's preying upon the same psyche.
It is. It's exactly the same mentality. So, and it works. Right. I mean, it's been working forever, and you know, it's effective. So they do it, and they'll keep doing it. But I put that article up because I was like, you need to stop and think, because we've all recently been in horrible airport situations, and you know, and you're going, how do I get home?
What we need to do is stop, collaborate, and listen.
Yeah. And just think a little bit and double check. You know, I mean, the minute you search, make sure you're looking at what you think you're looking at, and you're not looking at some random site.
I'm just embodying the Gen X, Josh, in that comment.
Dr. Doug, you keep using that phrase. I don't think it means what you think it does.
What? What phrase?
Inconceivable.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a Sicilian.
Yes. Never mind. So actually, I was thinking, as this, you know, the search results here is like, how many gazillion emails have each of us gotten about helping our, you know, with the search engine optimization of our particular websites, and you know, this is totally what they're doing. They're optimizing the search engine to return the bogus results. I mean, can be used for good or evil, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to downplay the threat either, because people will lie to you on the internet.
No.
People lie to you in real life.
No.
But we created this thing called the internet, and people will lie, and I think the worst of the worst is people who use the internet like this to prey upon children. And
they do.
A couple things here. So the my story number 8 is the Nintendo Switch helps FBI locate an abducted teenager. Now, there was an interview on the Jordan Harbinger show that I listened to with someone from our community whose name escapes me. And one of the things that this person works on, and you should totally go look it up. The podcast called the Jordan Harbinger Show. It was one of his more recent episodes. We probably know who this person was, and while we're talking about it, I will look it up to get this person's name. And I think this all relates together. And this person on Jordan Harbinger's show, again, is like a DEFCON goon kind of person, right? Has a site and all that stuff, but also works with or created an organization for tracking child predators. And what I love about this story is, and we've all seen the To Catch a Predator kind of thing. So this is like To Catch a Predator, except this person brings with him an MMA fighter. Which
not a bad idea.
It's just awesome, right? To catch the scum of the earth with someone that could just drop them with one punch without not even really thinking about it. This person's big and a trained fighter, and so the people don't really argue with them. And so the MMA fighter guy has his Instagram thing where he posts clips from videos of him meeting. So they pretended to be a 13-year-old girl on the internet, and they're like,
we've all done that.
Meet me at Walmart, and they met with an MMA fighter who just asked them questions. Like, why did you do? And they try and lie their way out of it. He's like, do I need to go to the chat logs and read back to you all the things that they said? And like normally they're like, no. And then usually they'd run away. Now, they're not responsible for arresting them, which I kind of, like, part of me wants to be like, can we just give those people the power to, like, hold them and arrest them right there on the spot and get rid of them
Very
right
dangerous.
there? But they usually get caught after the fact because they turn over all their evidence to law enforcement, and almost every single time that person gets arrested after. Like, they didn't talk about a story where like someone had escaped from that. In some cases, that person had tried to do it again and were caught.
Yeah, imagine that.
So I think it's super important that we support initiatives like that, using some of the skills that we know to find people and do that. But also, I don't know, work outside.
Just be careful. I mean, vigilante stuff gets a little sketchy.
It can be tricky. No, I agree, man. I agree. We all want to see these people.
Yeah, but it's easy.
Not be able to do what they're doing.
It's very easy to do numerous things that can cause massive problems for law enforcement. Then,
correct.
In the case.
You could blow the case. I agree.
Yeah,
you don't want to blow the case. I agree.
Then the DA is going, well, I'd love to prosecute this guy, but unfortunately, you've completely ruined all the evidence. You've tainted everything, and you screwed the whole case up. So,
like, also, I feel like if law enforcement did it, they'd have to find a way around the entrapment argument, which I'm not a lawyer. We have to get Tom in here to talk about
entrapment and enticement.
Yeah, dude, there's nuances in that in the law, certainly, that I'm not intimately, that Tom is probably way more intimately familiar than I am, obviously, but
well, I mean, most places now have computer crimes units and things like that, and
know how to work the law correctly.
If you are feeling kind of vigilante-esque, it's a good time to maybe get in touch with them and say, look, I've got some information here. Agreed. I'd really like to, get some real guidance on this, because we'd like to put this person in prison rather than just, I'm going to screw this all up. Or maybe you get hurt because not everybody has a handy MMA fighter standing by.
I liked having the handy MMA fighter. Like, if I was going to do this, I'd want a handy MMA fighter to come with me.
Yeah,
like, that'd be awesome.
I should get one at my house. Just, when people come trying to sell me stuff, like, hey, Marco, just take this guy out.
Take him out.
But I be careful.
I like how all
that.
your henchmen have Italian names. You got Rocco. You got Marco.
No, Rocco was the guy that was doing the water valves. He was
the water valve guy.
No,
he was the water valve guy. This story, though,
I'm a racist.
Absolutely hack back. Active defense, but no vigilantism.
Yeah.
Right?
Just, I mean, as you start going down that road, just be careful and think about, do I need to get professionals involved in this?
But this wasn't necessarily, I'm kind of glad you brought up the phrase hack back, because this Nintendo Switch story wasn't necessarily hack back, but it's how John Strand and I would often use technology in this particular case that relates to hack back, but it's really just getting someone's location.
Yep.
And in this particular case, a girl unfortunately was abducted, and they found the girl. The way they found the girl was someone else who was friends with them on the Nintendo ecosystem said, hey, wait, I'm talking to this other girl who's on a Nintendo Switch but had gone missing.
Right.
And see something, say something, had reported that. Law enforcement worked with Nintendo, and they were like, oh, absolutely, we can give you that person's location and recover the girl.
Yep.
Which is, I'm glad it had a really good ending like that, and thankful for that. But also, I think it's a good time to talk about monitoring your child's internet communications. The way this teenager was abducted was she was talking to someone who was online. Back to our previous conversation about how everyone will lie to you on the internet. That's actually like the fundamental, I think, for my own advice and training on security awareness. And I think most programs is like, basically assume that if you're getting communication over the internet or telephone, that you're being lied to. Like, just go into it with that assumption that you're being lied to. Because and I've done that for most of my life, and there's only a few cases without really
it's an
incident.
Exception, Paul.
It's an exception that you're like, I was really skeptical.
Talking to anybody with any medium,
but
I think it's more safe to think you're being lied to.
It's very,
even if it's face to face.
It's happened where I'm very skeptical, and I don't want to say mean, but a certain demeanor where I'm like, you're just lying to me, and the person really wasn't lying to me; they were telling the truth, and I was like, oh, you're so and so from that. Those exceptions are rare, but also very recoverable, because you figure it out and you move on. the 98% of the other time, it's someone just lying to you online. And I think that's something we need to teach to our kids, but also monitor our twofold approach. Coach our kids and train them to go, everything everyone's telling you online is basically a lie. And go into that assumption.
And I've done undercover work on child stuff and with the police. And let me just tell you, if you think that there aren't people out there in great vast swarms who are willing to lie to your children and tell them,
disgusting.
I mean, I was doing undercover.
It's astonishing how many, and I actually wrote that in my description of this article, Doug, that I'm still to this day astonished as to how many child predators are actively online.
I logged into a site and I listed myself as a 10-year-old boy from New York City. And within, say, 3 minutes, I probably had 50 people querying me and asking me if I like to drink beer, if I like to party, if my parents were at home all day. And just, I mean, some of them were just very direct. They'd be like, Are your parents at home right now? Where are you? I'd love to come by. And others were very subtle and saying things like, do you like toys? What kind of games do you like to play? And they're trying to be friends with me. And I would bet you the number of predators in that site was just beyond comprehension. And a lot of them, were just more than willing, if you just even made the tiniest suggestion that you were willing to talk to them, they would say, hey, let's go in a private room. So I'd take them in the private room, and they would immediately just start on like, well, where do you live? Like, I might be near there, and we could get together in a park or something and hang out, and I've got all these toys, and I've got a drone, and I've got all these cool things, and I just don't have any friends, and you're just like, oh my God.
It's disgusting.
Maybe want to hire an MMA, person to escort my kid everywhere.
Switch stories. Dear God.
Yeah. My last piece of advice is don't rely on technology to monitor your children on the internet. Take an active role.
Yeah.
Not just in education, but also just get their device and go through the mess. I mean, I want to tell you how to parent, right? But as cybersecurity professional doing this for a long time, sometimes just getting the device and go through the messages is absolutely the best way. Because also, if you're raising little hackers like I am, they're going to find ways around any kind of monitoring.
Oh yeah,
and be able to turn it off. So I kind of err on the side. My
5-year-old is about to get her first computer.
Yeah, dude, right?
And it's going to be the Pi 400 that I bought a while back with a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse, and it's going to be in the living room, not in her room.
Right.
More great advice. Yep. In a public place where everyone can see what's happening.
I got a story that I'd like to talk about just because of Jeff and Aaron, and that is my number 5, where that they're talking about signaling the EU to prepare for quantum cyber attacks. I mean, we've been hearing the get ready to quantum call, and this one is, directed specifically to the EU members, and they're saying, really, get going before Q Day. Q Day, I must have missed that before. That's the point at which quantum computers should break existing crypto. Mm-hmm. And they're saying within about 5 to 10 years, that's going to happen. And I'm thinking,
was there an advancement in quantum computing? And I believe it was Chinese computer that increased the number of qubits. Is that true? Saw something about that this week. I meant to add it.
I saw that.
I know that you track this closer than I do, this particular subject, but I want to say I did see something about that.
There was something. I got distracted by a recent university got one of the largest IBM quantum computers going this week. They're going to have it all installed by January.
It seems like IBM and China kind of trade most qubit kind of things in advancements. And we've always questioned on this show how true it is of what China's saying. I somewhat more believe what IBM is saying. I think China kind of tries to fudge it. Is what I don't think I have any evidence of that, but that seems to be where
that story came out on the 13th. It's that Zhuchongji computer, and they said they used 56 qubits.
56 qubits. Yep,
56, and they had 66 qubits available, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually is. And this is it's not Q Day, but it's starting to move things.
It's moving
along.
in that direction. I mean, 5-10 years, right? I mean, we're moving in that.
I have a question.
Sure.
How many bad actors out there have access to quantum computing capability today?
Well,
And what
Anybody that
level of
wants
Q day, this concept of Q day is not only the capability, but the capability becomes available, more publicly available to.
But back to our
Yeah,
Anybody
but
who
back,
wants
but
it,
Jeff, back to our
IBM is
cogs in
selling
the
them.
go back to our cogs in the wheel. It only takes one. Who do I call? Who do I call that has the most qubits? And what's the price on that to be able to crack the key?
Who's got the qubits right now?
IBM in China.
This is more
could-
to me. This is more of a sneakers plot scenario.
Yes. Oh, it absolutely is.
It is.
Yes, for sure.
I've got some information on this, some interesting information on this, actually, that those with big brains, especially Dr. Doug, will love. So, like, my old professor, when I was doing a master's at Edinburgh University, he's professor of applied cryptography at Edinburgh. I should get that right, shouldn't I? Called Bill Buchanan. And he talks about not every algorithm will run more efficiently on a quantum computer, which is obviously true.
We've talked about that before, Aaron.
And have you talked about public key encryption, about how it'll go first? And you need to use post-quantum cryptology, such as crystals and sphinxes and stuff like that.
Did you say sphincters?
Sphinxes.
Well,
It sounded like you said sphincters.
He said sphincters.
Pucker factor is high. Pucker factor is high.
How do you pronounce
Molly, sphincters.
sphincters?
No.
Clenched
Correct
sphincter.
symmetric key, they're going to be okay as long as you go to 256, because obviously 128 up to 256 is exponentially different, right?
Do you want the cheapest way to beat quantum decryption? Don't trust TLS. Period.
Well, it's true.
So we're back to sending it all in the clear?
Why not?
No. Symmetrically encrypt.
No,
Yeah,
we're
I-
back
One-time
to using
pads, one-time pads for the win.
Ah, somebody got in before me. One-time pads.
Yeah.
That would
Symmetrically
be a
encrypt.
very
I
big
can-
one-time pad, though, Jeff.
I can send a guy, courier, all of my major partners with 10 years worth of key for cheaper than Word encryption.
Sorry,
So
Josh,
how
you
are
were
you
breaking
going
up.
to distribute your secret keys?
No, I'm going to distribute the one-time pads for you and for Paul and for Doug and for Jeff. And I'm going to send somebody out, a courier, with flash drives for each of you, with different
Sounds
one-time pads
doable.
for each of you. And I will get 10 years worth of keys.
It's going to scale
$1,000
really
in
well
plane
around
tickets.
the internet. Paul, remember we were talking last week or the week before about PGP?
that wouldn't work,
Maybe
Josh.
we can have some PGP parties.
Oh yeah, key signing parties. Very different from a key party. I think goes back to our pineapple analogy.
Pineapples, upside down pineapples, yes.
Or can you?
You're swinging from topic to topic.
Is that, can we key Mali?
That too.
Oh no.
I think the what's going to happen with when it becomes more practical to break existing crypto is you're going to be fighting an inertia game, getting people to change to something better.
Yeah.
That if the bar is too high, it's just not going to change. Just as I've seen communication with other agencies, some have just not taken the time to raise the bar on the minimum level encryption. So so that business can happen, I have to enable the less secure encryption because there's nothing we can do about their high bar being too low.
And when you have to
People are
completely
getting
rebuild an
caught
app
out.
because it uses legacy encryption, it gets expensive, and that immediately says we'll put that in the 5-year budget cycle. So
Yeah, but I think we're a long way away. I think Jeff brings up a great point. Like, who's going to at first control the quantum computers that can actually break this stuff? That's one thing. But how far away are we from actually being able to use quantum computing to break some of the algorithms we're talking about? And I think it was Aaron that pointed out a topic we brought up on the show based on some research that was published that just like quantum computing isn't like magic pixie dust.
No, it's
to use
bad.
a really old Gen X analogy, like magic that could just break anything faster than anything ever before. There's limitations to that today that we believe will be worked out, as Lee pointed out, in the next 5 to 10 years. But 5 to 10 is a lot. I mean, that's a lot. But that's like a weatherman. Okay. It's a weatherman prediction right now.
But the thing about Lee's story that I think is the point that the EU is talking about, and the U.S. has talked about this as well, is that when that wave breaks, it's going to happen very quickly. And so doing more now to try to prevent this, because once it does start happening, it's going to happen fast. Mm-hmm, and then it's going to be, okay, how does our business adapt? How does our government adapt? How do we protect our secrets? Because, right now, nobody has access to this, and you can go on IBM and get access or whatever, but it's not widespread, and they're monitoring it.
You're wrong.
What?
Well, can I reach a little bit on this one?
It's going to be slow.
Hold on. Josh and then Aaron.
So, Doug, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so blunt, but you're 100% wrong. Let me explain why. I mean, when quantum decryption happens, it's going to first happen at Annapolis Junction with very, very large systems. Okay? And they're going to be using that in maybe Beijing. But those are going to be the equivalent of the first time.
Well, just say nation state, Josh. It's nation state level.
Yeah, but
there's only
but hold on. Yeah, but hold on, Jeff. I think Josh has a valid point that it's the largest nation states that can afford the research and the cost to build the equipment to build. Not just, I mean, it's cost, but it's also the environment. The way you build a quantum computer is ridiculous.
Yeah.
For lack of any more technical term, it's ridiculous. I mean, you would have to. I mean, could Elon or like a super billionaire go build this stuff? Maybe.
No, but they wouldn't be able to get the people.
The people,
you'd have to be like evil genius villain layer to be at that level.
Yeah, to even source. So, I mean, source the materials and all.
It's possible.
It's possible, but
realistically, we're talking about
if Elon Musk can look at spending a rocket to Mars, I don't think a quantum computer is very much different.
It is. There's a lot more rocket engineers than there are quantum physicists able to do this computing.
I mean,
I think,
a little bit I think on what's really going to change the game, and I'm sorry, I'm cutting in, is when quantum computing becomes much more feasible, and when it becomes something that can be virtualized and spun up in a container.
That's what I was talking. I mean, that's what I was talking about. I mean, I'm not talking at that point where we actually have it. I'm talking about the point after that where it does start to become commercially viable and people start trying to sell it. It's going to happen very, very quickly when that happens, because every marketing company on earth is going to want to say quantum enabled so they can sell their products. And I'm not talking about when the nation states have it and it's
but I think
univac.
But I think we're 5 to 10 years away from when the nation states have it.
I agree.
Right? No. But I think it's another 5 to 10 years after that.
No.
Until it's commercially viable is different from the nation states. Sorry, Aaron, I keep interrupting you.
Okay, so I'm China and I'm building my 30 qubit quantum computer, and it's going to be ready in 5 years. Okay, so we send a lot of encrypted data across the internet, which is very highly classified. So I hoover up all talk on the internet for the next 5 to 10 years. And then it's not at a tactical level, but more at a strategic level. I then data mine that information with my crypto analysis. And there you go. I don't have what's happening this week, but what I do have is everything that the US has talked to the UK about for the last 5 years.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
That's a lot of.
But let's be a little bit pragmatic for a minute. I mean, quantum computing has the promise, the ultimate. What we're calling this Q day is the ability to break, and I use that term loosely, the public key cryptography, which somebody mentioned TLS. It's what we're using for all of our internet communications to establish sessions and exchange a key that's used for symmetric cryptography ultimately, which is what makes the internet work. So you're not only collecting all the data that's being transmitted, you're you're collecting all the data that's in that initial handshake key exchange, setting up the sessions. I get that all that happens, but it's still for some amount of time going to be extremely expensive from an economic perspective to invest that kind of computing power to break the TLS encryption key, get those keys, grab the key that was used for the session, and then thus be able to read the data. I get that that's all feasible, but for a time, that's going to be really expensive. It's going to be the big nation states targeting very specific targets. It's going to be much longer before that translates into something that's economically feasible for the bad guys, the bad actors out there, to start using this type of capability against the things that we worry about in the private sector, just all the stuff that we talk about in terms of data protection and security and privacy and so on and so forth. And, part of the calculations when I was at that entity that was Annapolis Junction, as Doug referred to, was when we were designing systems, we were trying to not only figure out, was it mathematically, computationally robust and strong, difficult to break, but we'd also factor in, what is the cost of actually mounting that type of attack or creating the capability to do that kind of stuff. And would a nation's, we would measure this based on gross, in the old days it was GNP, gross national product. Now it's GDP. The measurement of how much money and a nation state has, and what percentage of that money
would they
which
throw
is
at the
finite.
problem?
It could be huge,
but
it would be finite. What percentage of it would they throw against this particular problem to get this particular data set? And would they? And this kind of goes back to way back to the beginning of that probability likelihood. Part of that is, would they spend 20 or 30% of their GNP to go after this one site that's got it's a utility company, and you're controlling the valves and the gates and everything in the water distribution process. I mean, that's something we don't talk about a lot, because it's kind of how do you calculate that? But nation states go to the trouble of calculating that, and things can be considered secure if the determination is it could be broken. It's relatively easy to break, except for it's expensive and it's costly. And what's the likelihood that any nation state or bad actor, APT, would spend that much to go after this particular problem? And I think the private sector is okay for a long time, especially citizens. Are okay for a long time. But
also, Jeff,
again, until it becomes until it's cheap enough and it's ubiquitous enough that anybody can grab it.
But also, we're marching towards selecting algorithms that are quantum safe from being broken as well.
Right.
So, but we're also working on the solution. I think we're hyper aware of the problem. We're also working on the solutions.
I talked to, I forget what the companies were, but I talked to several companies when I was at the Gartner Summit a month or two ago that are, at least one of them, have won the competition for NIST of coming up with quantum resistant cryptography, new algorithms that presumably can be used for that initial handshake to still do the conventional, pass a key that you can encrypt, because symmetric encryption, where it's the same key on each end, that's what we're ultimately doing with all this encrypted communications on our websites. It's the public key that does the initial key exchange, establishing the key for the session. That's what's vulnerable to quantum attack, quantum decryption. So
when
this is, I mean, it's something we need to worry about. and it's years down the road. I'm glad people are working on it. I'm glad there's algorithms out there that are quantum resistant. So it's a little bit to me like Y2K. It was this huge problem that when
is
it
it fall in the
happened,
same is it fall in the same category as Y2K or IPv6 or some combination of both?
Well,
I would lean towards yes, but that's just my opinion.
No, I agree.
So I mean, to back up what you're saying, when it comes to what we're doing, sitting in the gov space, what's being identified is critical systems and their key exchange algorithms as being the first thing to worry about, because Jeff's right. That's what they're going to go after. They're not going to try and break AES. They're going to try and break ECDH that you're using to exchange the key, because once they got the key, the rest doesn't matter. And certain algorithms are not on the list of things to worry about.
But breaking is a really loose term. Quantum cryptography.
Yeah, I'm misusing it.
Is brute forcing.
Yeah, agreed.
There's no breaking. There's no cryptographic attack. It makes brute forcing computationally feasible.
Right. Well, and at the same time, though, the tactic we've talked about for years is you don't brute force the encryption algorithm. You get the damn key. That's the weakest. That's the weak part. So we're just changing how.
That's been true for a long time.
That's back to our Microsoft story about losing keys, right?
Yep. Right. We're just going to.
There's very in the history of humankind, there's very, very few cryptographic attacks, especially with modern digital algorithms. It's all about everything's measured by what's it take to brute force it. And there are cryptographic techniques that could reduce that amount of time. The Enigma machine being an example where computationally it was infeasible with the technology that was capable at the time, which was mostly humans, of breaking. Breaking being brute forcing, trying all the combinations to get to that one key. Where Turing came in with the bomb, and the cryptographic attacks came in was. The weakness was not in the algorithm itself, not in the Enigma machine itself. It was in the fact that they started every message with Heil Hitler. So the first, 10, 12, whatever characters of every message, they knew what the plain text was. And that's a cryptographic attack where where you already know what the answer is. You can do it. You can figure out what the key is more quickly.
But what's interesting, Jeff, is even human code breakers did the same thing. If you look at many of the attacks that humans were doing, it wasn't they were trying all combinations. They were using other weaknesses to whittle down the number of combinations they had to try. And the same thing when you move to computers.
And that's where I get into the classified realm where I can't elaborate a whole lot. But a lot of cryptographic attacks involved coming up with ways. The analogy I can use is, AI and ML notwithstanding, but in the early days of computing, just trying to sort things, for the purposes of information discovery or finding data. Probability says, if you're trying all combinations, probability says maybe you get it after 50% of the time. But if there's shortcuts you can take, and when the underlying plain text is English or Russian or Polish, you can start anticipating. Well, and I did this a lot with password cracking in the early days. Especially with there was a lot of people coming up with password generators. Back when I was working at Annapolis Junction, where they were trying to come up with passwords that were easily memorized. And so their algorithms had something to do with, well, if we randomly select a consonant, let's let the next character be a vowel. Let's force the next character to be a vowel. So the 80 or 90 characters that were possible for the first character, the next character was going to be 5. And that creates, you're not getting them all, but you only have to get one.
We covered a story about that too.
The idea of cryptographic attacks.
I mean, the Code Girls talks about that, and also we covered a story where they broke some really old cipher that was used somewhere in history in very much the manner you described, Jeff. Just knowing the language, knowing different pieces of information to basically kind of whittle down the number of possibilities to be able to break the code.
Well, It's pattern recognition, and it's the frequencies of letters. It's combinations of letters. I mean, if you have a letter in the English language and you got the right letter, whatever the letter is out of 26 in the English language, there's certain letters that we're never going to follow.
Right. Yeah. Yep. It's a process of elimination.
That are much more likely to be followed. So you don't have to try all the combinations.
Right.
You try the ones that are more likely, and that reduces the brute forcing down to a much more measured. And that's the underlying principles of crack, John the Ripper,
absolutely,
loft crack, all of those.
Also, my story number 9, loosely related, is you can brute force a mobile pin over USB with a $3 board. And all this isn't even as complex as what Jeff and I were just discussing. This is just a dictionary attack.
Right.
This is, let's create a dictionary of, I think it was around, I want to say it was 1,000. It might even be less. The most common pin codes that someone would use on an Android phone. Doesn't work on an iPhone.
Think of the ones that you use. 1111.
Most of us use, right?
69.
They created a dictionary, but they programmed the brute force of the dictionary into a $3 little USB dongle that you can buy in all my, not mine, but our favorite hardware hacking sites, right? We can buy this kind of stuff. And this was a really cool hardware attack, like something that I want to get one of these things and program it and just have it in my arsenal. Like that's really cool. This was posted on Hackaday. Oh, so it's 20. So it's basically emulates a keyboard that inputs the 20 most common unlock pins on an Android device. It's pretty cool. So it is a DigiSpark board, a small tiny 85 base board with a built-in USB connector and an adapter. It has a lot of common with the DIY rubber ducky, except it's focused on doing a single job. And again, it's 111, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth.
Right, which again, that's how Cracked worked. Cracked didn't work with just, I mean, you could give it a dictionary, and there was all sorts of different dictionaries, but you would start with the basics. They would start with the most common and run through that, and then build upon that. Then they do a second generation when they started doing the guessing character by character. But when I used to run Crack, a lot of the passwords were compromised within the first couple seconds, couple minutes.
Or they won't be.
I like how, for those audio listeners, Jeff just casually flicked a bug off his arm while he was talking and didn't bat an eye.
I did. I didn't. Yeah. Awesome. I'm outside. There's bugs.
He's at a cabin. Yeah.
There's a few cool more hardware kind of hack kind of things. There is a sleuth untrusted USB communication. So this is a really cool, another hardware thing that you can put together, that the idea is to have an onboard microcontroller advertise itself as a storage device, pretending to have a file system with some common files available. When a known as USB device is first inserted into the USB port, I think we talked about USB devices being used in some attacks, even on this particular episode. So when an unknown device is inserted into the USB port, the valve tool displays information on an OLED screen that's on this particular hardware and displays whether the USB device is accessing files it shouldn't or immediately trying to write to the file system. Some of the hacks that you can do, the Flipper Zero and a lot of other different pieces of hardware, mouse jacking, bad USB, do just this. You insert the USB device, it is immediately trying to write something out to the file system. This will catch that and flag it. It's kind of like a litmus test for, is this device bad or not? I think it's a pretty cool kind of thing. Josh, you see this one? It's my story number 10.
Yeah, I'm looking. Pretty cool,
right?
The it reminds me of, actually, and his troll.
Sorry, you're breaking up, Josh. Get closer to your microphone.
Say 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, just get closer to it. I think it's cutting out.
Okay. So, do you remember Dual Core and his troll anti-forensics talk?
Vaguely.
So what he said was to write, or excuse me, something tries to read without writing, which is it immediately fills.
Sorry,
with trollolololo.
You're still breaking up, Josh. I don't know what's going on.
Sucks.
Yeah, something's going on with the gain on your mic. Turn up the gain on your mic.
Or you've got a noise
Turning
gate.
the gain up.
You got a noise gate. Like, yeah, it's cutting off what you're saying.
Well, here I'm going to speak directly. I'm having an intimate moment.
It's still cutting off. It's weird. It's very choppy.
You're going to have to put your mouth over the end of the microphone.
Switch microphones, maybe?
I can, but it's noisy.
I take noisy versus choppy.
I think somebody started downloading the entire internet at Josh's house.
Testing one.
That's better.
Okay, so if you remember, Dualcore had his Trollolol anti-forensics talk. Any write blocker reads without writing. Any standard device is going to do a test write to make sure it can write. So if anything reads without writing, it immediately fills the drive with trollololol. The fact that this is taking advantage of, I don't know, are they deficiencies? Not really. Not the word I'm looking for. Vulnerabilities. But it's looking for all of the different pieces of information about it. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think, this USB valve thing isn't, I don't think, practical to deploy to your entire enterprise of 100,000, desktops to be able to write. But if you're just doing testing, like, is this thing malicious or not? I think it's pretty wild.
So it does traffic analysis, and it does not traffic analysis. It does command analysis. Command analysis of everything that goes on with a new USB device. And you're right, for testing, for an IT help desk or a vendor management desk, like what is the vendor giving us in terms of dongles or USB drives or whatever. This is pretty cool.
Also, there's remote code execution on an oscilloscope. I thought this was interesting because everything's an IoT, device that has vulnerabilities. This particular oscilloscope is internet connected, and this person went through the painstaking process of emulating the firmware in QEMU, which is like it's like multi-week, multi-month process depending on what it is. And they kind of glossed over this in the article. So it says, to prevent potentially breaking a real oscilloscope, this firmware was emulated with QEMU. And I was like, well, in one sentence, I mean, that sounds great. I'm like, but I know, and from previous interviews we've had with Sunil, for example, Sunil Shah on the show, that can be like, he's like, dude, it's like months sometimes to figure out how to get. So like, props to this security researcher for doing that, but also kind of making us aware that, kind of back to the proof of concept that contained malware, the tools that we use as security researchers are also vulnerable, which I want to also make sure we highlight that it's not just I'm looking for a proof of concept, but it's also I have this oscilloscope and I'm using it for security research purposes, which is many of us would use an oscilloscope for, but it also contains vulnerabilities, so it kind of speaks to OPSEC. So I thought that was really cool and a great article. Make sure my story number 11 links to like the coverage of that story. Make sure you go read the actual researchers write-up of it. It's really good. Another one I found that relates to kind of hardware hacking kind of stuff, finding undocumented 8086 instructions via microcode. So like basically the TLDR on this one is you can go try all the documented opcodes on a particular CPU and fuzz all of them. However, that may not be all of them. You need to go look at the microcode or it's not even firmware, like the code running on your CPU. Go look at that, reverse engineer it, and go, oh, these are really all the opcodes, and go fuzz those. And this person actually found opcodes that were not documented that they're able to fuzz. Now, granted, some of the functionality in some of these opcodes were kind of like, yeah, like someone could do something, but it really wouldn't matter. Also, something I did not know is in the article they say you don't hear much about undocumented instructions anymore in CPUs. Why? Because modern CPUs have enough circuitry to dedicate some to detecting illegal instructions and halting the CPU, but the 8086 was squeezed too tight to allow for such luxury. I didn't realize that, dude. I didn't know that. Like, I thought that was pretty cool. It's a really cool article.
Which begs the question, how many 8086 processors are still out there?
Yeah, and exactly. Great point, Jeff.
Only at the airport.
Yeah, this is an academic exercise. This is the kind of shit that I nerd out with my coworkers at work. We found these stories to be very intriguing.
You nerd out? No.
Nerd out on this stuff? No. My story number 13, a case study on fuzzing satellite firmware, research paper on fuzzing satellite firmware. As part of this case study, they identified and responsibly disclosed 6 bugs in 3 different satellite images. So a pretty cool research paper there. Also, routers from the underground are exposed. This is my story number 15. What I find interesting, this comes from Lumen, that they discovered this particular malware, as we call it, that was compromising embedded systems and or routers. They had infiltrated more than 70,000 machines, getting persistent hold in more than 40,000 IPs in more than 20 countries, and went undiscovered for more than 2 years.
And again, who's still using routers?
Every single one of us has an internet connection, has some kind of what we now call IoT device that in most homes, right, is your router, it's your firewall, and your Wi-Fi access point all in one. I think it might have been 2013 or even earlier. It's interesting. This is on my own YouTube channel. I dug up this talk. I found a recording of my talk from BrewCon in 2011-ish, where I basically talked about this attack scenario. And described it in basically great detail. And I outlined, and I don't want to say I told you so, but this is totally I told you so moment. Like, I basically outlined, look, attackers are going to go after this particular type of device because, one, no one's looking there. So you got stealth, right? You've got impact because I can affect a lot of these devices and I can impact where your traffic flows and I can conduct attacks off of this device. I also have stealth in that no one's looking at this stuff. There's no intrusion detection system on these particular devices. There's no anti-malware or EDR on these devices. There's no monitor, mouse, and keyboard on these devices. So I can hide, I can have a great impact, and no one's looking at them. So it's like this perfect storm.
It's not stealth, though. That's more obscurity. Nobody's thinking about it. Nobody's looking at it.
I agree.
I mean, and my point about routers is, there's router functionality out there, but we very rarely, at least in the commercial world, see an appliance, see a device that's our router anymore. It's much more often a network that has.
If you found a good place to hide, is that not stealthy?
Yeah, but you're taking advantage of obscurity. But I think you add a good word into the vernacular to describe this, right? It's an obscure kind of thing that the obscurity provides you with some stealth. But also, I think I can back up the stealth in that we're not necessarily looking, or better yet, there's not great tools to discover hackers in this particular scenario. Well, yeah, I mean, the semantics of the meaning of the words. To me, stealthy means again, the sneakers analogy where when Robert Redford character was breaking into the lab or whatever, and they had to raise the temperature in the room because they would have picked up on a warm body walking in, but then he had to walk so slowly because there was motion detectors, but it was calibrated to whatever the speed was. I mean, stealthy to me is doing that kind of stuff, not I'm going to go into this data center through a back door that nobody knew was there because and so nobody's looking at it.
No, but it's a good point, Jeff. It's the, like, I'm in a ghillie suit. What's the suit that you wear that lets you make it look at the woods?
Ghillie suit.
Yep. I'm in the ghillie suit, and that's stealth. If I'm going through a back door that no one's paying attention to, that's obscurity. I think it's a good distinction, actually. I never quite dug into it as deep as that.
I mean, the point is there's a lot of things, my favorite hack was against, what would have been called a cloud provider 20 some years ago. And we found a way in, and I'll try to use the modern vernacular. So the C2, the command and control that we set up, we would have called it, we found a place to reverse tunnel out that nobody was looking at. But when I wanted to try to find a way to see everything in the network, I found a server whose name was TEM, Tivoli Enterprise Manager 001. So I'm like, okay, that's their device that's doing network monitoring, not security, just making sure everything's up and running. I'll bet that everybody trusts that device. Nobody's going to think twice about network traffic coming from that device. So guess where we installed a vulnerability scanner and ran it, and we were unabated, and we were able to do a vulnerability scan of their entire enterprise, and nobody was none the wiser. And they had all sorts of intrusion detection and perimeter defenses set up, but nobody was looking at that trusted device. It's like how many movies have you seen where, what is it? Nobody thinks about the mailman because he shows up every day, or nobody thinks about the cleaning crew because they're there all the time, or state dinners where all sorts of powerful politicians are talking stuff. Nobody's thinking about the wait staff because they're there. It's you're going after the places that nobody thinks about or takes for granted. It's not stealth, it's not obscurity, but it's certainly it's taking advantage of it's a trust. How many times have we talked about trust? You trust that, you don't think about it. It's not even, we wouldn't think twice about it. It wouldn't never come from there. That's the great place to go launch an attack from, or establish a beachhead.
I like how you brought up IBM Tivoli, which is if you're old, you know what IBM Tivoli is, because according to the internet, IBM began phasing out the use of Tivoli brand in 2013. And by 2016, had moved the portfolio of products into a revised and rebranded hierarchy.
Right.
You're taking me back, like, Jeff. You're taking me back, right?
This was like 2000, 2001. And it was like,
it was popular, but it was very popular back then.
What's trusted in a network?
Yeah,
the network monitoring servers.
Right. Solar.
I thought it was
solar.
I thought it was a cool place to start.
Absolutely.
Or even Target, Home Depot 10 years ago, but there was a lot of trickle of exfiltration of credit card data a little bit of the time, but it was coming out from, it looked like normal traffic. They didn't set up a separate port and use some weird protocol. They were just using the stuff that was there that nobody was looking at because it was normal. Not to give anybody ideas or anything.
No. Well, with that, I think we're going to transition to our pre-recorded interview coming up next with Sid and Rohit. It was awesome. Stay tuned. Coming up next, some information about new security certifications from Black Hat and some technical information about PHP type juggling. Stay tuned.